go.
Yeah.
They're not good.
Okay, let's go ahead and bring this meeting to order. The meeting of Fire and Emergency Management Committee meeting. Today is Wednesday, November 19th at 5:30. Roll call, please.
Axon is absent, Bardonish
Here.
and Mortensen.
Here. Wonderful. Okay, we have a lot to cover, so let's get started. And we have the fireworks enforcement discussion. So we started this topic at last meeting, so we're gonna continue. We have some nice items here to discuss, so.
Yeah. Let me just try to frame the discussion. At your last meeting, we had informed you that we had recently learned that because San Luis Obispo County had enacted a civil administrative penalties program for fireworks, we were uncertain as to whether or not that prevented Templeton CSD from enacting our own program. But David Hirsch is on the call with us today, or participating in the meeting remotely. But I think what I can say is, I think we've learned that we believe we can proceed, provided that our program, TCSD's program, is no more severe, it has no conflicts with the county's program. So we've presented it as a model and suggest that if we do decide to proceed with our own, it can't have any conflicts with the county's program. There's probably one other issue to keep in mind, and that is, we believe that because of this issue, if in fact TCSD enacted our own program and we were to utilize it and levy a penalty administratively on an individual for a particular infraction or particular incident, we couldn't do so if the county was also doing so for the identical incident.
I see. Okay.
So does that capture where we're at?
Yeah, we've had some interaction with the county counsel's office, and they've indicated that their view is, as long as there's no conflict, the county ordinance would not supersede us, only supersedes our ordinance under that statute that we discussed at the last meeting, in the event there's a conflict. So as long as we're in sync with the county in that regard, we can have our own enforcement efforts. I think there'll need to be some coordination with the county and the sheriff's department as it relates to how we go about all of this. But as Deputy Chief Paul has indicated in the past, they're spread pretty thin and also have to respond to other types of calls and emergencies. So I'm sure we can work hand in hand in coming up with some approach where we can have some level of enhanced enforcement, and a civil penalty ordinance would enable us to at least have some teeth when it comes to enforcing the prohibitions on illegal fireworks, which we adopt as part of the California Fire Code, as well as any further restrictions that we place on the use of safe and sane fireworks, including time restrictions, place restrictions, and things like that. If people violate those limitations, we can have remedies that we can pursue.
Okay, great, thank you.
So I think the issue before the committee, as it seeks to advise the board on this matter, is back in early September, the direction was the committee would work on these enforcement techniques, and with the idea that we would come forward with a civil penalties program or ordinance. And we've been into a possible conflict. We've seemed to have clarified that now. I think the option before you now is to discuss and proceed with development of our own program as one alternative, or partner or rely on the county's program and figure out how to support them in implementing their program so it's effective in Templeton. Okay. One or the other,
or a combination.
Yeah, or some combination where we rely on our program for certain types of violations and hope that the county's program picks up others, etc. I have listed, and I think it's helpful to kind of go through some possible scenarios, because I think there are ways in which our program might be more effective than others, more effective. If we were doing this sort of on our own, and then maybe some scenarios where we may be challenged or need to rely on the county for some assistance.
Okay. All right, so I guess, at this point, we wanna discuss, I guess, get the sheriff's opinion here in terms of what do you see, how do you see best moving forward for Templeton if we wanna try to have maximum enforcement? Is it work with you and try to do some sort of funding, you know, or do our own enforcement? What would you recommend or think?
I'll leave it to Mr. Hirsch and our county council as far as the mechanics of what achieves that goal for you, because I know they've been in conversation and legally it's gotta be enforceable. So that they're the experts on that, you know, as far as what we would prefer, or, you know, what I think is gonna work better. We will enforce the laws or the codes that are in effect. And clearly it's a priority for Templeton, you know, to enhance enforcement of fireworks has been talked about, you know, multiple meetings. So, you know, when I say to the extent possible, it's because I've ride this fine line of expectation management, like we've talked about in every meeting. I don't want to say that we're going to saturate with 50 people because I can't make that promise. You know, I've got to speak for the whole county, but I can tell you that we will absolutely be putting as many people as we can on the street, you know, next year for 4th of July countywide, including, you know, people designated for the North County, et cetera. The civil penalty process, the civil enforcement process, I'm very much a fan of because of the, you know, the lower burden of proof essentially. So if Templeton crafted their own, especially since the county's ordinance, you know, we're experiencing our first hearings. We had a couple of them today. And I was talking to somebody who was watching the hearings for the violation notices that we issued on the 4th of July, this past 4th of July, because multiple people took their due process right to the point of having a civil hearing. And I think that you're going to find, like any law or ordinance, you know, there are unforeseen consequences or loopholes or things that need to be tightened up. So I think if Templeton identifies areas that you'd like to be specifically tight, that, you know, especially if you see a shortcoming with the county's ordinance, I'm certainly not going to say don't do that. You know, go it on your own. But we will enforce whatever we need.
But in terms of personnel though, we could have the ordinance, but we're gonna have to have the, you know, the personnel to enforce it. So is the sheriff department able to have, you know, the whole night have personnel here in Templeton without worrying about other areas, you know, just focus on Templeton? It's like, how many, so how many people?
And so, I guess that's an important thing, whether you do your own ordinance or not,
Yeah.
we're gonna have as many people on the street as possible. Because it's either one could be enforced, and that's what we do. If you're asking for a commitment tonight as to how many people that I could put or we could field next 4th of July in the North County generally, or dedicated specifically to Templeton, I can't give you a number because I don't know how many personnel I will have to field. You know, what I can tell you is that I was talking to the undersheriff this afternoon on my drive north from another meeting. And I said, what I expect for next year is that similar to how we've historically done for the coast, going back to when I was a brand new deputy 24 years ago, where we put out notice in January that all leave is denied for the 4th of July and associated weekend. We will now be doing that for all patrol personnel countywide, north, south, and coast, so that we have all patrol personnel on the street, as well as it was this year, we were filling shifts with overtime. We'll continue to do that. But I can't give you a number because I don't know who we'll have.
And then how about the drone program? Are we able to basically piggyback on your program and just get additional drones where, you know, to work in Templeton if we provide the finance, you know, the finances, that money?
I think it's something we do. Our drones are going to be in the field again. I mean, they will be deployed on the 4th. So if there's an opportunity to partner for something like that, if it's a matter of how many we have, where can we send them? I'm not opposed to that, and we're totally willing to partner with anything like that.
As far as, excuse me, as far as the drone programs, you don't have the capability for GIS and park mapping and those types of things, correct? And I think that's what we were looking at, was being able to identify a property, locate the property, and then send a notice of violation to that property. That was kind of the drone.
I think there's still the parcel data within the GIS mapping, which can be identified, but it is on the parcel mapping that is published. So they would have to align within the company that would have to identify that
Correct.
parcel mapping and where the incidents occurred and then align it for it.
Right.
And we successfully did that this year.
Oh, okay.
Like,
Yes.
Perfect.
yeah, where we had the parcel maps, so, yeah.
Perfect.
So I think just to clarify, I think there's like a couple different maybe ways when you refer to a drone program. So the sheriff's office, I believe, has drones and drone operators amongst their own crew. There's also the opportunity to contract with like a vendor to provide drone coverage, and then after the fact, utilize that information.
Right.
With citations. It's maybe a little different. One might be something in the more real-time basis, and the other might be an after the fact, a value after the fact.
So, because from my question, is it fortuitous for us to align ourselves to the county's ordinance within regards to fireworks for us, so we have at least an equilibrium of enforcement? So that most county ordinances also align ourselves here to Templeton CSD so that we can enforce them along the same lines.
And by aligning, you mean, and saying you enforce them, meaning you could also use like designated CSD personnel for enforcement? I think that would be very advantageous, because if we could either partner CSD personnel, like with deputies, partner CSD personnel with a drone pilot, so that you had your person taking the enforcement action wouldn't necessarily have to be a peace officer if they're enforcing your ordinance, that would be advantageous for sure. Because that's the position we're in, trying to put some of our sheriff's compliance unit people in the field, combined with our drone pilots, was exactly that, just a force multiplier. I mean, there's not enough of us to go around, so especially for targeted enforcement, or, if those people are specifically for fireworks and a higher order need does come along, the deputies have to break and go handle, they can continue the fireworks enforcement. And being able to focus on Templeton because they're your people, meaning they're, CSD personnel or directly affiliated, I think that's advantageous.
And I think the intent is to do something of a stepped process. So in other words, we use our personnel, Captain Goldblum tied with one of our firefighters or something like that, to go out, make initial contact, get voluntary compliance, potentially write a citation, or confiscate at that point. And then if we start to run into resistance, that's when we back out and ask for the deputy's assistance in those types of situations. So we will have situations where we will be able to make contact, identify the person. If they then become aggressive in any way or resistive in any way, where they're not identifying themselves, not giving us their driver's license or those types of things, that's when we'll back out, ask for deputy assistance, and then re-engage when we have law enforcement.
And then if you do write a citation because you're doing it as a CSD staff, would that citation, the fees, would that come back to
Yes.
Templeton, or would it go to the county?
They would come back to Templeton.
Okay.
If it's if we had adopt an ordinance and we follow all the protocols of that ordinance, the revenue would be, that we're paid, would come back to TCSD. Again, we'd have to provide all the same provisions for due process, ability to appear before a hearing officer, et cetera. This isn't like a simple, even though it's streamlined from the perspective of not necessarily have to involve the court system, there's still a significant process that we need to have in place so that any recipient of a violation notice has rights to, you know,
And
to contest that.
And one of the things that from my previous employment that was utilized when we wrote administrative citations, and they were appealed, the city would contract with their attorney or an independent attorney to come in as the hearing officer and hear the case. And so, and then that falls on the defendant also at that point to pay for that if they lose the case.
So, and then, okay, so what do we need to do for our, you know, to ready our staff for this?
So I think it'd be helpful to kind of go through the various scenarios, because I think there are scenarios that don't require any interaction with persons that night.
Okay,
And then there are others that are gonna require a lot of interaction that night. And so maybe it's helpful, and again, when I said align, or the term was align our ordinance with the county ordinance. Again, that's really based on like the penalties. We cannot have a penalty that's more severe than the county ordinance, as an example.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we just briefly kind of came up a list of some potential scenarios, and maybe the first one is the simplest. We're talking about utilizing like aerial drone technology or even an airplane that flies overhead. I think for the first example, I think that works well. So if there is a person, let's say it's me, and I own property here, and my kids, adults still act like kids, light off fireworks in my home, and our ordinance is designed, if it modeled the county ordinance, which has this sort of social host component to it. If we were to obtain evidence of that, the district TCSD could issue an after the fact, not that night, notice of violation under the code to my property, me as a property owner, for hosting an event where an illegal firework was lit off on my property. And that could be captured by a vendor or an airplane operator, or a whole host of things that would require no interaction with me the night of the event. So if we talk about things like using drones or contract surveillance, I think it works reasonably well and minimizes the need for confrontations for illegal fireworks that are lit off on private property. But from there on, it becomes more complicated, maybe substantially more complicated.
One more thing that makes it really, that the civil ordinance really helps with for that private property example, is when that use of fireworks happens behind a fence. Behind any sort of fence or any sort of closed or locked gate, because it allows you to observe the firework coming from the parcel and assign the violation to the parcel without making person-to-person contact, which, depending on the circumstances of the fence and the gate and the extent to which it's closed, could technically require a search warrant if it were a criminal investigation. So you simply see the firework from the other side of the fence and it assigns to the parcel. That's a clean way to enable enforcement to change behavior over time without a lot of rigmarole, because you deal with the curtilage of property behind those gates.
And the county's ordinance contains this social host provision, so if we were to model it, that's part of it. Here's where we start to run into, I think, a little more issues. So another example is, what about the illegal use of fireworks on public property? For example, in the street right of way, or on a sidewalk, or something that's not a parcel that's owned by a property owner.
is it an illegal firework?
Well, in this case, it's an illegal firework.
Okay.
But
Okay.
so I'll give my example is illegal firework, but illegal firework in the street. So kids walk out here on the intersection here and light off an illegal firework in the street. So there's no property owner to go after necessarily, right? That's a county right of way. So there's no property owner to go after. There's no one's hosting an event there. People are out doing so. So the example of utilizing a vendor, like a security service to capture video evidence, or a drone vendor, or a company that would provide aerial photography, in my mind, that's probably not gonna be very effective, because yes, we can get a video of the firework going up, but there's not a property owner to later go after. You'd have to have such good video as to be able to later identify the person who did it. That seems unlikely.
So you need that one.
So that's a scenario where I think this sort of after the fact issuance might be more challenging, because nobody would have, under that scenario, somebody needs to go and speak with or identify the person who's lit off the firework.
It's a harder burden of proof, because if somebody lights it off in the middle of the street, if the drone or the aircraft were to capture that person walking back to a residence, it's just a harder burden of proof to say, well, they just walked up to my house, they live across the street. So we don't have an actual suspect in that regard, as opposed to if it's lit from a particular property, on that property.
So do we have a cost consumption from that? So for instance, legal fees, individuals who go and appeal saying, I'm just grabbing a hot cup of coffee.
That would be our appeals process, which is what I spoke to earlier. Hiring an independent attorney, having Mr. Hirsch, somebody else come in, designating one of our board members as the hearing officer.
Yeah, I mean,
That's legal.
actually, David, so the county's hearing process, the hearing officer, their first step, I believe, is with the planning department. There's a hearing with the planning office for violations.
It mirrors the planning one.
Different agencies use different procedures when it comes to hearing officers.
But I
From a
think the
due
first
pro-
issue that, yeah, go, yeah, so we
I'm
have
just
some
gonna say-
choices to make.
That's something that needs to be considered. You don't necessarily have to hire an attorney to be a hearing officer, although that often is a good way to go because it's a little cleaner in terms of the process. Someone who knows how to conduct a hearing. But you need fundamentally what you need is an impartial person as the hearing officer, who's not otherwise involved in matters not from the department that's involved, things like that. In a smaller agency, that becomes more difficult. Larger agencies, a city, for example, might have a hearing officer who's a department head from another department, but it doesn't work as easily in a small agency. So that's something that we need to consider. Jeff and I can talk about options in that regard. You can look how other agencies are doing it. It's a concern. A big entity like the county has other procedures already in place because they have, code enforcement going on all year round for more than just fireworks, and have the potential for hearings, year round for matters that have nothing to do with the fireworks issue that we're talking about.
I think my concern is the idea of, while I would absolutely like to penalize individuals who are using safe and sane outside of business hours and the illegal fireworks, I would appreciate the idea that these individuals can be cited and we have a slightly higher, like the burden of proof, if we will, for the individuals. So we know that we can go. It's to spend TCSE dollars going after individuals we don't know if we can actually get.
So I gotta be honest, for me, knowing the limited resource we have, that probably wouldn't be our priority this first year, going after safe and sane.
Well, okay, so my example wasn't
Just
addressing safe and safe.
Sure, but even
Right.
illegal.
I guess what I'm saying is I don't believe the drone footage
Yeah.
or an outside security, we talked about various options before about whether we hired folks to take video evidence is gonna be effective for these public property violations, because there's no interaction under that scenario between that person obtaining that evidence and the party, and so it's gonna be really difficult to identify who that person is. In that case, we would recommend or suggest that an individual would actually need to approach them and attempt to obtain contact information so that a violation notice could be later issued. Then we run into this scenario where is that person gonna be cooperative or not,
Right.
you know?
Well, I mean, also, we have to, think about, okay, we're starting this is gonna be our first year. So yes, there's gonna be some loopholes and things to figure out, but also just the whole idea of having enforcement out there. Is gonna prevent people from doing this stuff, going
Yes.
out there. So just having that whole idea, and we're gonna put out flyers, we're gonna put out information, and that we're gonna have people on the ground. So I know there's gonna be some loopholes and but I hate to say, okay, because it's gonna be.
I'm just saying, we
Yeah,
wouldn't be able
it's
to
not
rely,
gonna be
yeah,
100%.
yeah, we wouldn't be able to
Yeah.
rely on the drone kind
Yeah.
of thing for
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And I guess I also wanna suggest that our choice in how we go to enforce it is going to drive decisions. And I guess I'd hate to think that the only people who suffer a consequence are property owners because reaching kids or others who are in the street is too difficult. And so then therefore, all the persons from outside the community who come, who are likely not doing this on private property, quote unquote, get away with it. And the handful of property owners, because they're contained on their property, maybe not wisely, but receive a violation, so.
The way I'm actually envisioning this is we wouldn't be making a lot of contact with private property owners. What we would be doing is patrolling streets. If people are setting illegal fireworks off in the middle of the streets, please move back to your sidewalks, move back to your properties. That type of thing, that's just an education aspect. But we wouldn't be doing enforcement with regards to people on their own properties. We would be more focused on the public aspect of it, because we would hopefully have, a dual enforcement action of a drone or an aircraft taking care of that private property, so we don't have to focus on that. So the other focus, which limits our impact, would be that public property aspect. The second we see somebody at the high school, somebody at one of our parks, somebody at a park and ride, those types of things,
Yeah.
we would make contact with them directly. That limits the amount of people that we're interacting with.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I envision this is we're
We're not
not
gonna
driving.
catch it.
No, absolutely
And
not.
I don't think that we should set that.
But I just wanted to make sure that, so the expectation is if we're seeking to issue a citation for this type of violation, an illegal firework being lit off in the street that's witnessed, it's gonna require a confrontation or we're gonna have to approach that individual in order to get contact information.
So that issue, that exact issue I know came up in one of our hearings today. Because keep in mind, when I say, we've enforced this county ordinance, we've done it once because the ordinance is brand new, just in time for this 4th. And the issue that was brought up was exactly that, where it, that took place, the firework was lit off in the street and somebody retreated to a residence. I don't know what the hearing officer ultimately determined, because the person that I was talking to who attended the hearing remotely had to get off for another meeting, because that's what we do, right, as administrators. But a thought that I had would be to tighten up any ordinance. If you're gonna craft an ordinance that mirrors, to include language such that, if an illegal firework is discharged in a public place, including but not limited to a street, sidewalk, et cetera, and a person is observed retreating into the curtilage of an associated, APN, the violation can be assigned to that building, to that site.
That property owner.
Property owner, yeah, because that would address some of the, the guy ran up to my house, but I don't know who he was, right? So then whether it's a first person observation from somebody who's, let's say, closing distance, attempting to make contact and saying, stop, I need to know who you are, you're gonna get a violation notice, or a drone, or anything, it would be another way to try and assign that violation to a residence as directly as possible, and I don't think the county ordinance has that language as clear as it could be. So that, again, this is real-time stuff that I got today from hearing, so it might be an opportunity for Templeton to, if you're gonna craft your own, to, have.
Well, think in our line, the reason why I speak about our alignment is
Yeah.
if we align ourselves with the county, even if we have the ordinances that they stand with the county right now, we are in parallel. And as the county sees itself basically clarifying those ordinances, if we look at the APNs and things of that nature, that is something we can adopt into the future. So we wouldn't supersede the county. We would basically run in parallel with those types of ordinances. And yes, there will be in the first year some individuals who may get away within that appeal. But we know exactly how we would structure ourselves.
Well, and keep in mind, the authority, county ordinance or our ordinance, all comes from the same location. Health and
Yes.
Safety Code, Fire Code.
Yes.
So, you know, Health and Safety Code 12505 is kind of where we're dealing with.
And so I have a question, so like, if, you know, coincidentally, if there's a drone going by and, you know, sees this individual, setting off illegal fireworks and it's going to a specific house, can you pick up the facial, recognition or like recognize who the person is from the drone?
It depends, I mean,
Video?
not necessarily.
Not necessarily, so you don't know,
Not
okay.
100%.
Okay.
And that, you know, that was interestingly, that was another point that came out today. In one of the hearings, they said, well, could you ID the guy? Well, no, but I saw him go into the garage.
Okay.
So I think it's a very realistic point to bring up that in public roadways or, you know, visitors who aren't associated with any parcel is going to be more of a challenge.
Of course.
Right, and that's where I think, well, I mean, I don't know, we had enough fireworks going on this past year throughout the town that they weren't limited to just the park or just the
Yeah.
right of way, they were kind of everywhere, but I wanted to go over some scenarios so we could kind of anticipate how this would work, and keep in mind, if we're probably gonna rely on, at least initially, our limited staff, we have we already staff up for the 4th of July for the purposes of both deterrent, but primarily to put out a fire or fires. So we don't have a lot of additional resources that we can bring on. Everybody who's capable of working is already working as far as the firefighters. So there isn't another 6 or 8 people to make these contacts. There may be 1 or 2 who might have to shift and go off of that function to join any sort of firefighting efforts if a fire does break out. That would, of course, supersede this other
Correct.
this other action. So I just wanted to point that out, that I guess the next scenario that I think is important to kind of talk about is the county park. And what is TCSD's responsibility for the county park? That it's in TCSD's boundaries, but it's a county facility, and the county has established rules that prohibit the use of all types of fireworks. But has never enforced, or not in many years enforced, at least the safe and sane component. So what is the expectation of enforcement at the county park of TCSD? Again, same issues, the drones will be maybe not very effective because there's no property to go after.
But I thought that last meeting, the gentleman that was here from Parks, he said he'd be willing to, you know, depending, I guess, on the staffing, have somebody here, a couple of people here.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know, I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of people in the park. I don't think a ranger's gonna be very
I
helpful.
think I had discussed also with your team as well, which is the idea of non-sworn from the county, as well as some staff members here, which is the informational level, which is the idea that we have gross offenders and we have offenders. And the idea is to inform the public that no fireworks are allowed in the county park.
Yeah.
And to basically elevate these statuses up, where we look at it as first year is gonna be very difficult for all of us. But once we get an idea of what our status quo is, and then go after the gross offenders.
So it'll be largely, I mean, our tools are gonna be largely the same as they would be if somebody lights one off in the street, trying to identify who that is. If you've been to the park at night, that's gonna be pretty difficult. There's large groups of people. It's gonna be hard to see who lit off a firework specifically, unless we're really gonna have hard staffing in the park to make these observations. Now, you're right, you're correct. I think over time, if this is somewhat effective, maybe the park will be less attractive place to have these gatherings at night. and the problem may subside over time, but at least on a typical year right now, park is pretty packed with people lighting up fireworks. Primarily, maybe lots of them save and save fireworks, which are purchased here. So, anyway. I just
Well,
want-
you're gonna have an issue of still having, even with a lesser standard of proof, you're gonna have to still you show by a preponderance of the evidence that someone lit off the fireworks. But I think there's going to be an educational process. Even the idea that was just discussed of someone's in the street and they run into a house, so we're going to assign it to that house. They could deny that it was them, and we still, even if you create a presumption, they could still deny it. And you still have a burden of proof of showing by preponderance of the evidence it was them. But I think there's going to be an educational process as people probably over a several year period, learn that they can't do it and there are consequences of doing it. And even if a citation is issued and they fight it and they win because we can't prove it by a preponderance of the evidence, that's a lot of hassle to go through anyway. But people will get the hint that there's enforcement going on, and they can't do certain things during 4th of July, whether it's in the park or in the streets or whatever.
Park's gonna be about deterrence. There's no way you can, with the amount of volume of people, the density of people, as soon as you contact one person to commence the process, and let's say they're cooperative. Gosh, I didn't know, here's my driver's license, or here's my name. You're taking that information and there's 20 more fireworks going off behind your back. So that's where I think the educational component is key for the community as well as your visitors. And then an unapologetic stance across the board that, like, no kidding, henceforth forevermore, there shall be no more fireworks in Templeton Park. Because I'll be honest, like the first few years, and this is going back 2 decades plus, but I remember patrolling Templeton, seeing all kinds of fireworks here. And it wasn't for a couple of years that, like, they're actually illegal in the county park. Because the community culture was, we sell fireworks, we want people to light the fireworks off. And that's your decision. And it's I'm not here to weigh in on that, but that creates a challenge. So that's where the deterrence and the educational component of, like, no kidding, fireworks are not happening in the park. And it's gonna be a matter of essentially chasing people off, because you're not gonna be able to take the enforcement action with 50 cops or 50 enforcement personnel. There's just the density.
Well, and that's why I think it's important, whether it's every 10 feet or every 5 feet, we put a laminated sign. Fireworks of all kinds, of any kind, are illegal in Templeton Park, and we post them around all 4 corners.
Education, yeah.
Okay, another example that I wanted to kind of address with the committee, as we go to craft and plan for this first year, is the social host ordinance best matches like a residential property where we assume that the persons on that property are welcomed by the property owner. And then if they violate, they let off an illegal firework, it was under the occupant of the house was aware of it and condoned it by not chasing them off or prohibiting it. This same thing occurs in Templeton on private property on, like, say, business property in general, where the businesses are closed. Lots of businesses have parking lots where today people go to those parking lots and light off fireworks, some safe and sane, some illegal. I guess my first inclination is I don't believe the social host component seems to apply in that case, because it's more like those persons are trespassing on the parking lot, not necessarily a guest of the business. But I wanted to, have an understanding with you. Is it your goal to cite that property owner for that violation?
Yeah, for business, I was thinking.
No, and I've seen it down by Evers, like during the fireworks time, there's that back lots and things like that. It's almost impossible without them being gated to prevent the individuals from lighting off fireworks from those areas. But at the same time, I think this is the ramping up as we see over periods of time. We start looking at the private individuals. And then it would be individuals, let's say a business did host several individuals that we saw with aesthetically, we had a loiterer running around, seeing that there's a lot of IR around there. They're having an event, then that may be a possibility, but for businesses that don't have the ability to actually fence themselves off and someone lights off fireworks, that might be very difficult for us to actually cite.
So again, I think in those cases, it's probably requires that sort of direct interaction to
exactly.
determine who the customer was as opposed to the business owner.
So I would.
All right, there's, again, so, and I'm sorry for, there's some more. I wanted to get a sense of, there was a discussion at the September board meeting about limiting the use of Safe and Sane fireworks to the 4th of July only and cutting it off at 10 p.m. Right now, Safe and Sane fireworks are lit off in the evenings leading up to the 4th of July, and the cutoff is later. What is your intent? What is the committee's intent that we prepare for with regards to violations of the use of Safe and Sane fireworks outside of their designated hours from an enforcement standpoint? Is the committee's expectation that those persons would be subject to an administrative citation, or is it simply, reminding them that the cutoff is 10 p.m. and it's only 4th of July only?
Honestly, this first year enforcement, and I don't speak ill of it, but to educate the individuals here within Templeton that this is the rules. We have changed. There's been a historical amount of time that we've lit it off Safe and Sane and illegal, which we're against. But the idea of saying someone's like July 3rd at 7 p.m. you light off a Safe and Sane, saying, okay, well, we saw you do this. You need to be told that this is no longer allowed.
So education only, education
I
only.
think education is our first bet within this first.
I just want to make sure as
For the
we
next
approach
three-
so as we approach the drafting of the ordinance and what authorities, that we provide, then is it your expectation that violations of the use of Safe and Sane fireworks, whether it's hours or locations or whatever, are to be dealt with through education only, at least initially? And then if there's still problems a year or two down the road, you would consider that later and maybe change the ordinance. So we'll focus.
I think it's important.
In my view, that wouldn't be addressed in the ordinance. There's always discretion when it comes to issuing citations or
We
not
still
to
have
issue
the ordinance.
citations.
I would say
And
the
the,
ordinance.
and the goal of code enforcement more broadly is to get compliance, not to necessarily punish people. So it's perfectly appropriate to have a program the first year that's focusing on education, at least to the extent that it applies to the Safe and Sane fireworks and any new restrictions that are being imposed.
And I think it would be just like backyard burning. Backyard burning, you're not allowed to do it, period. Do we have to write a citation every time? No. It's an education process. And quite honestly, in law enforcement, they call it the attitude test. But it's whether or not they're receptive to the education. And at that point, I think we leave it up to our personnel to make the determination as to whether to cite or not to cite based on the attitude of the person and their compliance.
And I think that goes hand in hand with SO as well, which is the idea is that they see something within Templeton, they understand that they're not supposed to do it. Educate the individual if they're showing gross negligence for it, things like that. It's like, hey, I'm back here for the second time, you're doing the same thing again, you're getting a citation.
If they do it in July 1st and then do it again July 2nd or 3rd, it's like, so that's like anything else.
Okay, so as we, I guess our next steps are to begin sorting out sort of the procedures for that would be contained within the civil penalties ordinance. David, do you have other questions for the committee as we kind of try to draft something up that models the counties?
Not really. I think it's pretty clear the path we're going down. We can put together a draft ordinance, for discussion purposes and kind of go from there. I'd be curious after hearing Chief Deputy Paul and his comments about the county's ordinance and what he was observing with respect to the hearings, if there's any anticipation that the county's ordinance might see some proposed amendments because we'd want to follow on that too.
I don't know, but I hope so. Let me put it that way. It's on the to-do list. You know, we have I know our compliance unit has been engaged with county council, who drafted the ordinance about tightening up some of the things that, you know, we have identified as loose ends. So yeah, I do think, again, I couldn't rattle the list off the top of my head. But I do know that I believe there's places where that ordinance can be tightened up.
So then
And
my
of course,
question
we can communicate with the county council's office and see what's happening
we
there.
align
and-
ourselves currently with how the county is, and then county becomes more strict on certain types of violations and things of that nature, then it would just be more formality to come before the board for us to.
Yes, but even making minor changes to the ordinance has a certain process, two readings in 30 days, so we would have to start early enough to make sure it was in effect for the 4th of July holiday. So if we adopt, for example, if we go now and draft an ordinance and you begin the process of implementing it, let's say in January, just hypothetically. And then, you know, if the first reading is in January and it's adopted in February, then it would take effect in March, plenty of time for the July 4th holiday. But if in March, we then realize the county's gonna make some improvements or some things that we wanna kind of follow with, we'd have to kind of determine whether or not we were able to implement those in time to be in effect for that season.
But if the county sheriff is involved, if they do any citations or anything like that, then they'll be using the county ordinance. anyways, right?
Yes, if the county sheriff is
Yeah.
is enforcing it,
Then-
that's correct. I think
So-
it's just, we wouldn't necessarily be able to enforce under those provisions unless they
Yeah.
were contained within the TCSD.
So that'd also just be a communication between us and the county.
Yeah.
Basically saying, hey, we're looking at modifying these ordinances. And then we can review that within this board.
David, one question, with regards to the administrative citation, the actual document itself and the levels or first, second, third offenses, subsequent offenses, monetary values, does the board have discretion on those numbers, or is that strictly in administrative or health and safety code with regards to what those numbers are? Or is that a court fee structure?
There's some discretion in the numbers to the extent that violations are otherwise considered to be misdemeanors. And of course, there are currently for health and safety code violations relating to fireworks. There are significant penalties for those misdemeanors. I think what $2,000, something to
Right.
that effect. So I think there's flexibility there in terms of how that gets structured.
So is it something they need to determine now before the ordinance is drafted, or can that be done?
It would be done when the ordinance, as part of the process of adopting the ordinance.
Okay.
I know
I think we'll
for,
start with trying to mirror the county's levels, or, you know, to avoid a conflict with the county's ordinance seems to be
Yeah.
what would be, it would be important.
Yeah.
But we can review the levels that are in the county, and
Where as long as we're not more than what the county.
I think
is.
that's correct. Is that David?
I don't know that.
yeah, we don't want to have any conflicts with the county's ordinance.
Okay.
It would supersede us.
But that doesn't pertain to the cost. We could be, our citation amounts could be higher than the county's, correct?
Probably, we'll have to think about that. And the county's ordinance, what is it, $1,000?
Yes.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Does it step up?
Did it.
I think that's the same thing they did in Grover Beach also with their new ordinance,
Okay.
$1,000 fine.
It's still discretionary, right?
I mean, in terms of taking action, or, sure, yes.
Yeah.
Any comments from public so far? I mean, it can't hurt. Go ahead.
Yeah, there was a couple on the, one, on Halloween night, there was, mortars and fireworks going off celebrating the World Series ending, that definitely cannot be blamed on safe and sane fireworks. The argument, safe and sane fireworks was always been, if there's no safe and sane fireworks going off, it'll much easier to police the illegal fireworks. If they shot them off on Halloween, and no one got a ticket, why would they believe that everyone on one night, July 4th, any person's going to get caught?
Well, that's what we're in the process.
And
of
then New Year's Eve
enforcement.
is also coming up. Now, they normally start on June 20th, setting off mortars. Will the new law, will there be enforcement on any other day besides the 4th, or will it just be the 4th?
We're planning on having enforcement and,
Yeah.
once we get our ordinance going, it
Because
will be
I can
enforcement.
see next year, no mortars get set off on the 4th because they're watching. But it'll be the 1st, 2nd, 3rd,
Yeah, well, no, yeah, our,
June 21st, you know.
I believe the enforcement, regardless of what point of time in the year, it will still be enacted. Whether or not we have the personnel to actually enforce those will determine whether or not, just as in the 4th of July, we can't police every residence and private businesses, but we will make the best benefit or,
And
the
then
best effort.
another question I have, we're the booth over by the post office, we're on River Run. We watched a family that stands out in front of their home. The kid gets on a bicycle, goes to the corner, River Run, and the one right behind, sets it off in the intersection, right, and then rides the bike back over. Obviously, it's not in front of their house, but it's in front of an intersection. Set mortars off. One of them fell over and shot directly at our booth. Yeah, I mean, it went off in the dirt, like right behind. It was, but they're doing it right in front. If someone has video, if someone has, is there any way to turn that in?
what is the county?
Because I'll set up a camera right at that home where they're standing in front of the home and they have a teenager ride his bike to the corner, set it off and go back.
Oh, that's the issue you've been having, right?
Well, yes, and that is 100% in line with what we talked about earlier with, lighting it off in a street or something going down the street. And I will tell you that we experienced like a change in tactics in real time this past 4th of July, even in Oceano, when they saw our unmarked unit and figured out what it was, doing exactly that, driving, farther down or riding a bike. So I think that's an absolute realistic problem. It doesn't surprise me that you saw it. As far as turning in a video, we've not yet done that for this new county ordinance.
I don't want mortar shot at our,
Right.
Legal.
So, I mean, tonight I would tell you, I don't know what that mechanism would look like because it may come with a.
Because I just might put the camera out there anyway, even if I can't send it to somebody. I'll put it on Templeton Proud, but.
But, yeah,
Well, I
I
think
guess
it's
you
important
report it, right? Report it, and then if the sheriff gets there on time, then they could have, speak
Yeah,
with
and
the
that's what-
individual.
That's what I was gonna say. I think it's important when that happens to call it in.
We've stood together in front of the booth and they're going off in mortars. I know that no one can give a ticket, and no one can be there and they'll just walk inside. I'm saying,
Well, that's
does
changing.
my video of it give any,
Oh.
if I call, I mean,
So, sir, your video might be subject to the same scrutiny that drone video would be, which
Yeah.
is, can you positively identify the person? Was the video altered in any way? Not saying you would alter it,
No.
but these are the things that come out in a hearing. These are the exact things that complicate enforcement, whether it's fireworks or burglars. So I wouldn't dissuade you from taking the video and for providing it. And I would anticipate that in the coming days, the county as a whole encounters that, because you're not the first citizen like to bring up that concept, including can neighbors call in on neighbors? Putting my, deputy sheriff hat on, what I'm concerned about with that is the subsequent disturbances when a neighbor provides a video and then gets confronted as soon as the enforcement entity leaves by the neighbor that just got.
this flashing blue light a camera that's in the corner?
Yes, it is.
I mean, we need 4 on that and then it'd just be set up, but. I mean, McDonald's had one in Atascadero, the trailer with the camera. For the park, just have 4 or 2 trailers with the cameras and just.
So again, the surveillance techniques were part of what we brought to you back in September, and I think they're all on the table. I think this other concept of a citizen turning in video footage, something we'll have to figure out if that's something that would be sufficient to proceed and likely to uphold a violation through a hearing process. So a little different scenario and adds a level of complexity. If we, again, if we obtained a video with our own personnel, we could be confident that there's no changes to what the video contained, and it could be submitted as evidence. The more hands that touch that, the riskier that becomes, even in a civil process. But I think it would still be worthwhile to anticipate those kinds of issues and determine whether or not we would be able to handle them or utilize them for prosecuting, and that's a bad word, but for making a charge through this civil program. Maybe it accompanies other evidence, like a district personnel observed a person lighting a firework, but did not have a video, and we have a video from another source that has the same information.
Yeah.
Or a citizen could testify during a hearing as to what they observed. And that's
Oh,
evidence
that's it,
too.
yeah, okay.
So I think one of the major issues is not necessarily the minutia of how we do the enforcement, but the fact that we can enforce it.
Yes.
And that is one of the things that's before us that we'd like to bring before the directors, and the idea that we would like to enforce ordinances against the illegal fireworks or the illegal use of safe and sane and locations there.
Yeah. Previously, we didn't have any ordinance, neither county or us, we didn't have anything.
So we were relying on a criminal.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a whole different ballgame. So it's gonna make a big difference, and over the next few years, I think it's gonna change people's behavior. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so let's go to move on to AB 1403 surcharge. So you have some examples of City of Orange, City of Gilroy, and City of Lakeport, or is that?
Yeah, so this concept, or this a fairly recent law has been enacted that would allow an entity like us that permits the sale of safe and sane fireworks to charge a surcharge on
Sales
those.
tax.
Yeah, well, it's an additional imposition of additional fee on those that purchase the fireworks or those who sell it to fund education and enforcement. And so this suggestion came from TNT Fireworks as a tool to allow us to enhance education and enforcement. What we did ask, we're still seeking examples of either a fire protection district or a community service district that has fire services that has implemented such a fee, and have not yet found one, but there are a number of cities that have done so, and David Hirsch has reviewed this and believes that while we were hoping to find a sample of something of a community service district or fire protection district, we believe we could still proceed with implementing this type of surcharge. But I did want to address some of the complexities around it and kind of just talk about what your thoughts are. So, for example, in the case of the City of Orange, they have implemented this fee, and the fee is set up so that it is adopted as up to 7% of the gross sales collected for this purpose. And the actual fee or the amounts collected from the booth holders is determined only after the fact. So in this case, the City of Orange tallies all of its costs for enforcement and education, and then also examines the total amount of fireworks that were sold, and then determines what the percentage needs to be in order to reimburse itself for all of its costs up to 7%, and then essentially invoices the fireworks booth holders after the fact. So it's not, under that scenario, the booth holder would be uncertain as to what that cost would be. It could be as high as 7%, it might be lower.
I guess I'm confused. I thought in this scenario, the 7% was when people purchasing the fireworks, they pay that amount.
No.
They pay the 7%.
In the orange.
Yeah, right?
That's generally how it works.
How generally it works. but-
If I can just read from the statute
Yes,
as
sir.
to what was adopted, it says that can require each applicant receiving a permit to pay a fee uh, of a pro rata portion of the actual and reasonable costs of the city, county, fire protection district, and so on, uh, incurs that is related to any of the following, and it talks about processing, issuing permits, inspection, kind of enforcement, public awareness, and so on. So I think the way Orange is doing it is based upon that statutory language where they are determining what those costs are after the fact and assessing a pro rata share of the costs,
Up to 7%.
up to 7%.
Up 7%. So I guess I think that is a model we could follow. I want to maybe tackle this 2 ways. Right now, we impose a fee that includes some of these same costs. The permit fee that we ask the booth holder, the booth applicant to pay includes some upstaffing costs for the night of the 4th of July. We haven't kind of done the math to see whether or not that, I mean, we don't collect, I think there was some back of the napkin math done here at the last meeting that indicated that maybe if it were truly 7%, it might be something somewhere in the neighborhood of $30,000, if my memory serves me. We don't collect that. We don't collect that level of fees. I believe it's about $6,000 that we collect
So
presently.
there's a kind of a difference to it. So for the city of Orange, what the idea is, they know what the static cost of upsampling the amount of personnel that they need. They are readjusting based upon the sales in order to cover those costs. They're not putting a hindrance upon their own staffing. So in a static, on the other hand, then each one of the retailers knows exactly how much. Now, depending upon how much is sold, the Templeton Community Service District may cost us more for our staffing because there's less sales. Or we may have more sales and that covers above and beyond what the staffing levels is. Orange's position is that they are only covering the staffing levels and costs, and yet it is variable to the retailers.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but I was under the impression that this fee will not come from the booths themselves. It'd be from consumers who purchase fireworks. They'll pay that.
That's correct.
Yeah,
Well,
so then.
in an indirect way. So I guess
So
the
they
same thing
pay
is like saying,
additional money, so like say if the booths charge, they normally charge $100 for a firework. So now if we set it at 7%, the consumer will have to pay $107.
Well, 114 because
there's sales tax.
Yes. So-
Plus, yeah,
So here's the challenge. If we follow the orange example, that number is is not known at the time of the sale. It's up to 7%. And I suppose there's nothing preventing the booth from collecting the 7%, even if they have to later remit or are able to later remit a smaller amount. But in the orange example, that amount that's going to be remitted to the city is not known at the time the fireworks are sold. It's just capped at 7%. So it's somewhat, it's something that we need to be able to sort out ahead of time or.
oh, you have a question?
I think one thing has to be taken into consideration. We can't use previous year's sales because we're changing two major things. We're changing how late we're gonna stay open and the fact that there will not be any shooting off fireworks the 1st, 2nd, and the 3rd. I have a nurse that'll come in up to the window. Sorry, kids, we can't buy fireworks. I have to work on the 4th. We can't shoot them off. My sales will be down, so therefore the amount, we're cutting two places. We're cutting and I have to close at 5 o'clock on the 4th. Most of my sales is last minute sales on the 4th, everyone grabbing. because the other two booths, they go home, they close up, they come to me, I stay until the very last moment. So, because I'm here for it. The, having to close at 5 o'clock, your amount will be dramatically reduced. Because the high school booth, does 4 shows a year, and everyone comes, they watch the show, they buy fireworks. They won't be able to do shows because it's not in front of a home. So no shows, their amount's gonna be dramatically down, and the surcharge will be dramatically down.
We're making.
Just be aware of
that. You can also make a provision for the booths to be able to demonstrate certain types of fireworks outside of that light off area.
Yeah, we could do that.
And I think, I mean, that's a wise idea, and I understand where the idea of the up to 7%, I think it's at least from my perspective, the fair statute is to put a static amount so that the consumers know how much they're paying for the surcharge or the
Yeah,
enforcement.
I like Gilroy, from what I was reading, I like City of Gilroy's. I was,
If we charge the 7%, the maximum amount, and you come back and tell us, oh, we only are going to ask 5% of you. That extra 2% that we have charged our consumers, where does that go? And is it lawful?
That's
do that.
unrealized, and I don't know if that's lawful.
I mean, the Assembly Bill or the 1403, it says that it's based on the percentage of the permittee sales and use tax return for the applicable permit period, not to exceed 7%.
Yeah.
So it's based off of our gross sales that we turn into the State Board of Equalization for sales tax.
so we could do 7% and that would be it.
Are we gonna be charged both the 1,500 and the surcharge that pay for?
Yes.
So,
This is an addition.
So I guess, David, what's your take if we follow one of these cities as a model and we wanna try to keep it as straightforward as possible? Is there an obligation to true up our expenses to the revenues received each year? As the city of Orange seems to do, or can we state it at 7%? And let's say our expenses end up being, months later, you tally the expenses and they end up being somewhat less. Does that remainder amount need to credit the following year, or you need to spend more money the following year, or lower the assessment?
I think we have to keep the assessment based upon the reasonable cost that are incurred by the district. It's not a flat number. I don't think you can really do it that way. I'd like to see some other examples, and I was hoping we'd see some more provided by the TNT people, since they're the ones that brought this to our attention, but they haven't been particularly productive when it comes to giving us examples. But I did find a couple of agencies that had these kind of systems in place that predated the statute. And they probably were doing that on the basis of there were cities and they have more in the way of police power authority. But it really was based more on, again, truing up the costs based upon a proportion of the reasonable costs they were incurring to deal with fireworks issues.
So right now, again, we already have a fee that is designed to offset some of the costs, although it doesn't obviously cover the enhanced enforcement or the enhanced education that's expected. Those would be assumed to be some new or additional costs. I don't think you could both have the surcharge as well as include those same costs in a fee. Essentially would be collecting it twice, once up front and once later on. But it looks like then if we want to try to collect the maximum amount necessary, we would need to follow sort of the Orange model and then invoice after the fact based on costs, or do the best job we can at estimating what our costs are going to be, estimating what the total sales are going to be. And by the way, we don't receive that information right now. I don't they don't, the booth holders don't report their sales to the district. And then estimate the fee amount and adjust going forward if necessary.
Can we request the last 5 years worth of sales data from each one? So that we can identify whether or not a flat fee, let's say we call it 5, or let's call it 7, aligns with enhanced enforcement.
Don't base it on the last 5 years. COVID money, when everyone got money, is not going to base it on how much you get. Ours has gone down. When every kid 18 years old got COVID money and spent it on fireworks because they couldn't go to Disneyland, couldn't go to Magic Mountain. I mean, you're gonna have an inflated amount and then go, wait, why am I not have that amount?
Sure.
COVID money is not.
So is there a recommendation by the retailers on the amount of monies that we could potentially, like
Yeah,
project?
but it's definitely gone down. You see
Our booth has been pretty steady. And I can give you our gross figure for last year and how much you would have gotten from it. So we grossed $37,930. That's before TNT's 50%. But gross based off our sales tax figures. And that would, at 7% would be $2,660 to the district. And you guys all, and the district already receives $1,427 from us. So we've been pretty, and then TNT takes their portion off of that. So our net is about $14,000 to $15,000 a year. We're the smallest group.
We're one of the larger, and since COVID, we've steadily done over 100,000 each year in gross sales. But as he mentioned, COVID was the highest we've ever seen. It was staggering. And COVID was the only time during my tenure with the booth, as the president especially, I've ever seen our booth actually sell out of fireworks. In fact, one portion of our group, they got to go home. They showed up and they got to go home because there was nothing to sell. And also agreeing with the time, he's right, the gentleman here is correct in that the last minute sales, he does stay open later than we do. We close typically at 8, which we'd like to suggest moving it instead of 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. because then it is dark. People at the last minute, it's still a respectable hour. But that is absolutely a massive part of our sales. And we don't even raffle off our big bang until 4 p.m. on the 4th. And people who don't win that then come back and they are in the term, spending hand over fist cash and card to get what they want. And that's our wheel and deal hour. As long as, our markups, we wheel and deal. It is, from a business standpoint for us, it is better to profit $5 off of a $500 firework package than to return it to the company. To pack it and return it. We would rather make $5 than, yeah, we could have made $500 off of it, but.
I can add to something. I think you're looking for a number. Based on the rough number from the last committee meeting, it's about 17,500. Based on 7%, based on what we did last year as a whole. Is it gonna go down? Probably. We're gonna add the surcharge, that's gonna dig in sales. Stopping at 5 p.m. is a big deal. Like Amanda suggested 8 p.m. Hopefully that might be possible. That would add to sales, add to the surcharge, and they can still light off their fireworks by 10, we think. So, yeah.
Saying net is 15K overall, or
17.5 would be set 7% based on the retail sales that were generated last year by the fourth.
And that's on
I'm estimating for the.
that's TNT only, not the.
No, that
No,
includes
that's
the fourth booth. I just estimated for their sales.
Oh, okay.
Based on.
Yeah.
So
And it-
all 4.
As president of the booth again, of that booth over there across from Chevron, it would be helpful from a sales standpoint to be able to tell our customers, we're charging you this percentage and this is where all of that 7% is going and what it's doing. And people want to know where they don't fuss as badly when they know where their money is going and what it's doing. That it's not just more money being raked in.
So then the
Taking
question is, non-sworn staffing,
Yeah, that's all.
you know, that's,
So we're already staffing up on the Fourth of July, so it depends on what additional staffing you're looking to obtain. There may not be any more personnel to bring on. I
I
mean,
mean, we were staffing up previously for the fireworks.
we already
but
are,
just
so
not
this would
being
be-
you know,
paid.
we were, we collect, remember, we collect
But-
about $6,000.
But it wasn't enough though, right? It's
Well-
not
Well,
enough.
how much is it?
it's a question.
Yeah, I would say that we established the fee 7 or 8 years ago that matched the cost of staffing up. Now our staffing costs have gone up, and so maybe it doesn't fully cover it. But what I guess I wanted to point out, one of the options that we brought forward to you in September was if we were to hire, like, say, an airplane to take video evidence, that was about 10 grand right there. That wouldn't be, we wouldn't have that available because the difference between what we collect now and let's just say optimistically it's 17,500 on the high side is only the 10,000.
Yeah.
You know, that's not gonna cover additional educational costs or putting up other signage or.
Drones and.
Well, exactly, the drone program, the Overwatch program, the additional staff that we're gonna have to pay to stay longer hours, if we're going to continue that enforcement, because we're gonna get, excuse me, we're gonna continue to get called out throughout the night.
Yeah.
And typically I've cut these guys off at midnight and just said, go home, and then heard continual.
And then we're gonna have the staffing now from earlier, I mean, before, like, we just staff up all the way to July 4th, right? So now we gotta maybe start, earlier, like July 1st, or.
From the enforcement side of things, yes,
So you're gonna
Captain
have to-
Goldblum will probably have to be more
Yeah.
available on those days to be able to respond in when we get.
Cost more money.
There won't, the $17,500 wouldn't cover all those costs.
No.
There isn't enough money to
Yeah.
cover the cost of bringing in additional.
So I'm not, so I keep going to
So you-
7% is not gonna be, I don't think we're gonna have to worry about refund.
You're suggesting that we're gonna, our enforcement costs are gonna exceed $17,500. If we're gonna spend money on aerial surveillance and or upstaffing.
Yeah.
Bringing in additional people for enforcement in the days before, that's gonna be way higher. than that.
Yeah.
We,
Yeah, 'cause I don't-
But within the guidelines of at least education for the public, if we were to have a limited set of additional staffing. Let's say we have that 7% coming in, are we able to pay for that limited staffing during that period? Let's say from 4th of July, post parade into the evening, along with some non-sworn from the SO and possibly citations for the
Well,
individual.
that's not taking into consideration any non-sworn or.
Just ours.
That's just our folks, yeah.
Okay.
So I would say if your expectation is to have these fees cover our current upstaffing plus additional enforcement personnel dedicated to evenings, before or potentially after, depending on the day of the week when 4th of July falls, and video surveillance, the cost would exceed and perhaps exceed significantly the amount of money if the 17.5 is a solid figure.
It's gonna be a problem.
Yeah.
We don't have the money.
But if we were to implement, just hypothetically, if we were to implement, let's say, even moving from 5 PM to 8 PM or whatnot. So what does 17.5 bring us for enforcement or education?
It's about 11,000 more than we're collecting now.
So
So
from the
we're-
perspective of what does it bring us with regards to our enforcement capability? Well, it's gonna be on our on-call folks.
Okay.
So the people that are on the engine, if we get a call for illegal fireworks, they'll respond. They'll go out to the location. If they catch somebody doing it, they'll have the ability to cite. If they hit resistance at all, they contact SO responds. And then we kind of back out, or we provide the citation with their backup. But if if we're on scene of enforcement action and we break a call, well, that enforcement action becomes secondary to
course.
responding to a 911.
So I mean, it behooves us to bring in those funds to fund the staffing.
Most definitely.
So-
But still not gonna be able to do drone programs.
No, but
So,
at least we're doing a step forward. Rather than keeping things at the status quo that we have. So we have the ordinance that we can apply, we have the staffing which we can fund.
Well, and I think it's important to understand that the drone program and or the aircraft overwatch, you know, depending upon their minimum charge, that might have to be it for that first year. And then we'll get a base number on what they would charge for anything more than, I don't know if it's a base number, I think they said 4 hours of flight time.
So, I mean, can we request Boots to voluntarily pay certain amounts, certain fees? Not, I guess we don't call it fees, but
We currently,
in addition, because,
well,
We're not-
that's where the 7% comes in.
well, the 7% is coming from consumers, they're paying additional money. So then at this point, then we have, because this is not gonna be enough to do what we need to,
This
And
may be enough to, in our first year,
I mean, first years, we need to be more aggressive. The first couple of years, we need to be more aggressive, having more people out there, having the drone programs and so,
Well, one of the
we're gonna
things,
end up spending $30,000-$40,000.
yeah, I think one of the things that I'm taking into consideration is an educational video, obviously. Now, I know we did a recruitment video, about 3 years ago, roughly. That recruitment video, which was a 3-minute video, cost us about $3,500 to $4,000. And that's just a quick recruitment video. If we did an educational video that was somewhere in the neighborhood of a minute, that we could put on social media, you know, get KSBY to put it on a community event, those types of things, you know, we're probably talking about $1,000 to $2,000. But every time it plays, except for on social media, then, you know, we're getting probably charged for that unless it's something that KSBY would do as a, you know, community.
Or even things like signage or whatever, like sort of zero
Signage.
tolerance for fireworks, those kinds of things throughout the community.
Correct.
Those are new costs that we haven't incurred in the past.
Correct.
So that is gonna come off, just rough numbers. If the new 7% fee raises $17,500, just again, just ballparking it for now. Our current fees collect nearly 6,000. So if those go away, 17.5 becomes the amount of money that's available. That's about 11,000 more than we collect now. I'm confident that our current $6,000 doesn't really fully cover the upstaffing that we already do. So you have about, you know, no more than $11,000 worth of new money to work with. And the flyover was 10 alone. So, you know, we'll have to pick and choose. If the goal is to not spend more money than we bring in on this enhanced education and enforcement and upstaffing, then we'll have limited, you'll have to limit where
Well,
you
I don't
put.
wanna pick and choose, I wanna have full enforcement because it was ridiculous what happened last year. And I brought this up to the Boots before, that the Boots need to step up at least initially, the first couple of years. So are they willing to go ahead and maybe, as I said, donate money?
Our nonprofit already has.
Yeah, so donate money, and if it's not possible, then we may have to cancel the fireworks booths. I mean, that's the bottom line. I mean, the only reason I voted yes to move on was because we were hoping that there'd be enough money. But obviously now we're talking $10,000. That's not gonna be enough money to cover all the enforcements and the educations and things like that we have. to
So maybe
offer.
your question is probably best answered by David. Are there ways beyond the surcharge to collect from the booth holders to support this education and enforcement efforts? Or are we limited to the 7%?
I think the way the statute is structured, we're limited.
Now, you mentioned doing away with the current fees. do we have to do away with those current fees? The current fees on top of the 7%.
I think that's what Dave was saying. So if the 7% serves as a cap, then we essentially would be collecting 7% plus additional fees. So that we would be collecting it essentially in addition to 7%.
But we wouldn't be collecting for booth inspections, application filings, I mean, all of that kind of stuff.
Are they non-separate? One is
They are
sales
separate.
and one is code?
Yes. That's why I wasn't aware we were thinking about doing away
It
with.
says that it's for processing and issuing fireworks permits, inspection of fireworks stands,
Yeah.
public awareness and education campaigns. That's what's included in that 7%.
That's correct.
No, but I'm talking about the actual, permit fees and those things.
But that's
Right,
fine.
the 1427 we pay covers inspection of fireworks stands.
Right,
Right,
Are we
but
able-
this 7% is supposed to cover that too, so it'd be like paying it twice.
But are we able to establish a fee set static and then on top of that, we basically
I
sales
think,
charge?
I think you're limited to fees based upon the cost being incurred by the district.
Okay.
Otherwise, you're talking about taxes under Prop 13, under, Prop 218, you have limits. There are severe limits on public agencies' ability to raise funds. So, fees such as those in the statute are all predicated upon the reasonable cost being incurred by the agency. It's one of the frustrations that public agencies have when it comes to funding activities.
So I think conservatively, maybe that's a place to start right now. Conservatively, we may be capped at 7% total from the booth holders in terms of the imposition of a fee.
and those other fees that we're collecting go away now.
Yes.
So we're looking at the 17,000.
And that's maximum 17,000.
Yeah, so that would create a situation where, I mean, we could step up our education program with regards to, and I know the drones were significantly less than the Overwatch program, because that's an actual aircraft.
Yes.
But still,
I guess you have some options. You could proceed down the path that you started in September. We could implement the code changes, implement the surcharge program, and then tally our costs, and then come back at the end and say, look, this really costs, in order to do this right, it's gonna cost you $25,000. $17,000 or so comes from the booths, and then the fire fund or the property taxes or Measure A, or however you wanna look at it, is covering the other $10,000 or $15,000 to fund this program. I guess another way to look at this is, even if Safe and Sane fireworks go away, there are gonna be costs associated with enforcement on the 4th of July.
Because we don't sell mortars.
yes.
So as Mr. Hirsch thankfully mentioned, you gotta remember this is a fundraiser. And for my booth specifically, there are 12 groups involved. And I can tell you that this year, after everything was paid, taxes, etc., each group is only receiving approximately $2,900 for their efforts and for the sales, even though we are one of the higher booths. So you're talking about asking more of us. How much more are you looking to ask of us?
But those groups, they have like 6-hour shift, right? It's a 6-hour
8-hour
shift
shift.
plus a 2-hour shift, so for 8 hours, they make 29.
For ultimately 10 to 12 hours, plus the meetings all year long and the hustling. It's a phenomenal fundraiser, but you can fundraise in similar with, say, an FFA barbecue as well. So
Yes, this is, yeah,
it's a time honored tradition and it's great in 4 days, but how much, if you need more, we'd like to know how much more you're asking. Another 4%, 10%, what what are you asking of us?
I think,
You said 40,000.
yeah, it would have to be determined. I mean, I wouldn't want to give a number that, you know, is from the hip. We'd have to do a real time,
I think it'd be more than what we currently have.
more than the 17.
No, so right now we're saying a flat fee upon each.
But
So whatever percentage, if we were to do a percentage, it would have to be more than that.
How could a flat fee be fair to all four booths when we don't even come close to?
I understand that, that's what I'm saying, is like, as the current fee structure is set. If we were to charge a percentage, we would need to pay at least as much as what we're getting in right now, if not more, for the extra educational.
Yeah.
And so we'd have to determine what that amount
But it's
is.
still gonna have to get capped at 7%, whatever it is.
Correct.
Well, and the statute talks about pro rata share, so
And what?
I just, oh, sorry.
pro rata share, so it contemplates that the booths are paying their pro rata share of those costs,
Not an equal amount each.
not a flat fee.
So our fee structure predates this bill. You know, so we have currently a flat fee on each booth holder. This is a newer bill, a newer law that allows for this, alternate means of collection.
I'm sorry.
The only city that I am personally involved in that charges a surcharge is Lompoc. And I know they have a license fee and then they have the surcharge, so maybe they're doing it incorrectly, I'm not sure. But I just wanted to throw that out there that. Maybe
But
there's
I think you said that their percentage that we're charging was 4%.
4%.
Yeah, so they're not going to the
Surcharge is
maximum.
4% Lompoc, and they have,
So that's why they're at 4%, because they have the other fees and they don't wanna,
Well, they use that aerial surveillance, which was quite costly as well.
yeah.
Yeah, that's actually who I got the estimate from, was the fire chief for Lompoc.
Is the ticket money accounted for somewhere in that to fund it?
The what?
Is the tickets given out
Citation.
Oh, citation.
Administrative
Oh,
citation.
figured in there
Yeah.
somewhere in
The
the
fines.
funds?
Well, we don't know what that's gonna be like,
Well, $500 ticket, you give 10 tickets.
but that's, if the sheriff does it, that will go to the county, so that would have to be from GTSC.
And there also could be costs associated with
Yeah.
appeals and hearings and things
Yes.
like that.
So
So,
you can't really count
I
on
mean,
that, and then our first couple of years, we were thinking of doing, our first year at least, doing more educational, so. We don't wanna really count, we're not gonna do as many citations.
How are you gonna spend 40 grand and do mostly education? Where's?
Well, as the drone programs have to increase our staffing for multiple days, so those
You're
are all
gonna get a
costs.
drone and then say, here, today is
Oh,
a,
sir, this is how it works, we
No, I'm
can't,
just
we're
thinking,
not,
that's what
we don't
I mean,
live
you're
in
gonna-
Russia,
give them a, next time, don't do it.
So, no, I think one of the ideas is like, I agree this idea that we can transition in for a sales perspective. And we can say whether it's gonna be 5% or 7%, or whatever we wanna see it, get rid of the flat fee. Identify how much cost is coming into it, so we can supplement it with salary that we actually have. We can start the enforcement and the education into it. We can identify from our first year period of time, if we are having monies coming in from citations, if there is any type of discrepancy for that, we can start identifying other opportunities such as drones. And elevate or ramp up the types of enforcement that we can provide based upon the monies that are coming in. Or we take a cost hit and we.
Well, I can tell you right now, the fire department can't take any more hits.
No, we
No,
can't. We
no,
can't.
I don't believe so.
That's the thing, we can't take any more hits. So that's the problem.
But I also don't wanna see us not doing enforcement.
So I guess the thing is, I think we're sitting here today saying that the 7%'s a cap. It raises more money than we collect today. So if you're gonna proceed with allowing, if you're gonna maintain allowing the sale of fireworks, setting the fee at 7% would make more resources available for education and enforcement. We'll have to be able to justify the 7% based on our estimated costs of providing that service, at least initially. And so $17,500 doesn't go very far if we're gonna enhance enforcement. I'm confident that we will not be raising more, if that in fact is a good figure, we will not be raising more money than it would cost to enhance our enforcement. We'll just have to pick and choose what kind of enforcement mechanisms we utilize.
I believe so. Sir?
No, I think, yeah, I think it's one of those situations where this first year, we may have to limit the upstaffing that we do based on the amount of money coming in. And obviously direct most of that to the 4th of July.
So we are seeking some direction from the committee as to whether or not we should begin drafting an ordinance that would allow us, or a mechanism that would allow us to collect this surcharge and sort of undo the current fee structure so that it is in place. We don't have a lot of time to do this. Our permit program is kicked off in March. So these booth holders need to know before then, or at that time, what the costs will be.
And I can also reach out to the drone the drone companies, because I know in talking to the Lompoc Fire Chief, the drones were significantly less than the aircraft. And I think the aircraft was $10,000 flat fee, 4 hours. Anything over that was pretty significant hourly rate. The drones were, I want to say, a fraction of that. I think they were somewhere in the 2,000 per hour range, or I'm sorry, 1,000 per hour range, where it was $4,000 for 4 hours. Don't quote me on that number, but I'll get a definite number for you. But from my understanding, to cover larger areas, the drone, you needed multiple drones. I don't know what the up cost of multiple drones is. So I'd have to research those numbers.
I mean, as a base minimum, I mean, I think the idea of a civil penalty ordinance and enacting it.
Oh, yeah.
And then at the same time modifying what we have as the base rate pay per fireworks stand to the 7%. Should at least get us for this next year until we can identify other resources that we can have. And yes, the drone is a viable option, but at least to have something before the board, so we have at least something to bring before the board rather than continue this conversation without that resolution.
Okay.
Yeah, and we can develop a enforcement and education budget that tries to match the projected revenue. You know, in other words, show what we recommend, at least on how to spend this estimated 17.5 or whatever it ends up, whatever the best estimate is. But it's just right now, the booth holders don't report their sales to us, so we're reliant on, you know, we don't have a way of confirming the amount of money that we would collect under the 7% scenario. And again, it sounds like there's an expectation that sales would be lower going forward. So maybe 17.5 is an optimistic number.
So can we, during our board meeting, also discuss possibility of eliminating safe and same fireworks at that same meeting, if the board member brings that up?
So you're suggesting that when the fire code, so right now our rules about safe and sane are contained within the fire code. When the fire code adoption is coming soon, because we have a new version of the fire code anyways, and could the board strike the references to safe and sane and eliminate that during the adoption of the fire code? David, I think they could, correct? As long, it would just require that the
Sure.
introduction would have to include that. A second reading would have to confirm it.
Yeah, that's where it's embodied. Allowing it is part of the adoption of the fire code, and it's an exception to the prohibitions on fireworks otherwise. And As Jeff mentioned, we have a new code that is coming forward. The 2025 California Fire Code is being adopted by agencies around the state. And Tom is working on that, as I understand it.
Yes.
Thank you.
So we're planning on presenting that to you in the way that we were directed by the board on September second or third. Sorry for drawing a blank on that, that first meeting, that early meeting in September. However, that's not law yet, and it will need to come before you, and the code takes 2 readings, so the introduction, if there's a desire to change it at the introduction, it could be done then, provided that same language is approved during the adoption of the following meeting.
I mean, it's unfortunate. I mean, I guess there was some misinformation going, coming from TNT where we could charge additional money, and I did not know there was a limit in terms of we have to basically verify our expenses. So I thought it was, yes, we could charge the 7% and use, the money was coming from people who were purchasing the fireworks, and then that money could be used for enforcement. So I thought it was a win-win situation for everyone, but yeah, this is, to me right now, I'm not comfortable with it at all. Because even with the 7%, we're saying that's maximum $17,500.
Sure, but it's a pathway forward.
But we may be able to, still consider
Okay.
working with the sheriff.
Yeah, but keep in
And
mind, regardless,
You're gonna have to do a little bit of enforcement, but
well, it's gonna not be a little bit, it's, whether we do away with safe and sane or keep safe and sane.
Yeah.
We're gonna be dealing with enforcement.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, and the idea of the enforcement that we can have for the illegal fireworks and any monies that are coming in to help support that would be ideal.
I just don't wanna take a chance for fire department, so we can't afford to lose any money, so we were very, very fortunate this last year, so. And we don't, so we'll see, but anyways, I think you have enough direction to move forward.
Yeah, I think we can take a step.
So, and then do we need to talk about the fireworks education?
Yeah, that's separate item. There was a request at a recent board meeting that this committee discuss some educational materials that might be prepared in time to go out prior to the New Year's holiday. And there was a submission of some draft, and I'm trying to blow this up, draft information about what that might contain. And following receipt of this draft information, our staff just try to kind of condense it and make it a little easier to a little quicker to absorb, kind of a little more of a graphic and prepare this draft. Now, I guess I wanna just highlight a couple things. The suggestion was to have the materials go out in the district's utility bill and be received prior to the New Year's holiday, with the assumption that there are maybe more illegal or other fireworks that get lit off on New Year's. We will have 2 more billing cycles before the New Year's holiday. However, the December billing cycle, due to the Christmas holiday, may not be received by customers prior to New Year's. It's just sort of the slowest mail delivery time of the year, and we've got some holiday closures in there as well. So to confidently get it to customers prior to New Year's, it would need to go in this month's billing cycle. And our deadline from our publisher is tomorrow. And we requested an extended deadline so that we could bring this to you at this meeting. So we have essentially right now to determine whether or not this flyer works, or you have very minor changes that you'd like to make that we could finalize like by tomorrow and get it off. If there's a desire to include this, I do want to, I guess, just a statement that says if we publish this flyer, it's under the assumption that Safe and Sane fireworks are available next 4th of July, because that was the direction we received from the board back in September.
I don't think I agree with the first line of the green check. Just because of the way that people are reading it and saying that safe and sane may be allowed. They may misconstrue the wording, even though the thing says, it's a green check, but it's only for July 4th. If we're gonna send it out as a mailer before basically it's another red X that says it's not. However, Safe and Sane is available on 4th of July, but not for New Year's. If we're gonna send it out, if we're worried about New Year's fireworks.
I guess we could just concentrate for New Year's, yeah, so we could just take that.
I mean, we could change the title even to say, you know, no fireworks are allowed at all at any other times of the year, and then switch this to like only during the 4th of July, maybe make that the bottom bullet point. Safe and Sane fireworks are permissible, so instead of it leading with that.
Yes.
So
What, I mean, what do we mean is permissible, are you talking about 4th of July principle?
We're talking,
yeah, right now it's
Well, I
the
mean, what
same,
are we
same
gonna
remember.
mention?
we're sending it out for the individuals for New Year's Eve.
Yeah, so why are we even mentioning Safe and Sane? There shouldn't be anything, nothing's allowed.
Fireworks are illegal.
Yeah.
Correct.
Oh, we don't even.
All
need to
fireworks
mention-
are
yeah.
illegal on.
Okay, we have like, today to figure out what we wanna communicate, if we wanna communicate this. So,
I would highly recommend that just fireworks in Templeton are illegal. We don't even have to mention the 4th of July.
Yeah, Safe and Sane, yeah.
so do you want, is there, is it worthy?
All fireworks, Safe and Sane, everything that flies, anything that's in the air, enforcement penalties, those are all good. I think it's just the first paragraph. Which is. Well, valid, I think it's misconstruing the idea that you have a legal room. Versus the idea of like, if you have questions, like at the very bottom, you have questions about when Safe and Sane fireworks are legal.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about 4th of July, so right now, yeah, everything
Just
is
right now.
illegal, everything is illegal, so. What's illegal? Everything. Everything that flies.
Okay, we could strip off the two first sections and just make any types of fireworks are illegal on New Year's.
Yeah.
On New Year's, any time other than the 4th of July, look for more information about what's permissible.
Yeah, I think
on the 4th
it's
of July.
important to distinguish other than the 4th of July.
Yes.
But anytime throughout the year, fireworks are illegal in Templeton, except for on the 4th of July.
And that's like the very last
We
thing
haven't
that ever
really
said in
decided
a
on
bullet
the 4th of
point.
July either,
Right.
based on
Well,
this
your
meeting.
your code right now permits Safe and Sane.
But that could change.
It
It
could.
can't, but I think on this idea is we don't want to put any way to say that any fireworks. So just, they're illegal, very bottom, if you want to put a little bullet point that just says Safe and Sane are legal within, or see current Templeton rules, or however you want to see it. I would, whatever the fire chief really feels should go out to the public, because
I don't think we've identified other holidays as problematic other than the 4th of July, although we acknowledge that there are some fireworks that happen
World Series.
randomly, whatever.
Super Bowl.
But not en masse, and there are quite a few on New Year's Eve that do go off. I mean, it's extended and none of them are legal.
Yeah, so,
That go off.
yeah, so I would just say it. And then my other one would be, if you go back with the fee, it says up to $50,000. In it, is that,
I mean, we wouldn't be able to impose a civil,
yeah, so.
civil.
I mean, can we just say fines up to, 1,000 per occurrence or per fine or something?
What is the
We
county?
haven't adopted anything yet.
Yeah,
No,
this
what
this
is
is
the
all
county?
coming
This is
before. this is a
50,000,
request.
that's so unrealistic, it kind of makes it look fake,
So when
No,
I
it's
made
the second.
this piece, it was based off of the other flyer, which was asked to be brought to the committee, so I took that flyer.
Oh,
and
that's
I
this-
plugged it into something smaller, so it was
Okay.
taking what was requested to come to you guys, and I pulled that information to make into a
Where did,
more user-friendly educational.
where did the $50,000?
So if you go up to, if you wanna scroll to the top of the flyer, I just pulled what was in here, because that was what was requested to come to you guys to look at, and I made it into something more reader friendly, so the information in the
From-
bottom one came out of this top one.
That's the, yeah, up to, It's up to, yeah, but that's a health and safety.
500.
It's saying if illegal fireworks cause a fire, injury, or property damage, the user could face felony arson charges with
Yeah.
prison sentences ranging from 2 to 9 years.
So, if you only wanted to say all fireworks are illegal on on New Year's or any other time of year, with the exception of Safe and Sane well, I guess I'm concerned that,
Yeah, we don't, let's not mention.
We don't need to mention Fourth
Yeah,
of July, I
let's
think
not
we just,
mention 4th of July.
this is the flyer that goes out for the holiday season, so that everyone understands that fireworks are.
okay,
illegal.
so does the committee wish to see one go? If there is a small cost, it's gonna come out of the fire fund. It's about $300 to put a color.
Yeah, I think you should go. We just gotta start getting the word out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's early education.
We'll see what modifications we can make tomorrow morning and still meet our
Okay,
deadline.
sounds good. Thank you. All right, next is, any comments on the flyer going out? And so the first page is not going out, just the flyer. Okay, thank you.
The first page is what got
Yeah,
us.
okay. Any comments on the flyer? Anything? Okay. Great.
We're publishing the first page, at least on the website.
First page,
Page.
I don't know where the content came from. It was a suggested flyer. We can post a flyer on our website. Right now, our code is what is the law.
Yep.
And the fire code, that's even today's code is illegal fireworks are illegal. And it defines when safe and sane fireworks are permissible.
I think that's also satisfying, Director Logan, because, her point was to make sure it's illegal, so that's at least what she brought up on the board, so. I think the fact that we're gonna say everything is legal right now,
Yes.
that's. Okay,
All right. Well, we have some folks that were here solely for the 4th of July, solely for the fireworks discussion. So if we're gonna move on to item number 2, I think those that are here for fireworks they're welcome to stay, of course, but maybe it'd be an opportunity for them to go have dinner.
okay, thank you
Okay,
for coming.
I'll sign off also then.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you as
Bye-bye.
well. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. All right, Chief Safer Grant. Here you
So
go.
actually,
By
I,
8.
not that I wasn't
Thank you
paying,
for coming. sir.
Thank you, sir.
You take care, guys.
not that I wasn't paying attention to the previous discussion, but as we were going through that, I did again log on to the FEMA website. It just came up this week. And we are still pending. So I don't have any updated information on the Safer Grant at this point. However, there have been departments in the county that have received notification that they received.
They received?
Yeah, one department,
Oh, which one?
in red. I don't know how they did that. because, Yeah,
That's good.
So it's still pending. We haven't been told no. We are concerned the longer it goes,
Yeah.
it doesn't feel, the longer it takes to get
likely.
notified.
Yeah.
The longer it takes.
Yeah. Okay, fire station expansion.
So the fire station expansion, I reached out to planning and building department. I got a estimated date of December 4th back for comments.
Oh, wow. So they
We
moved up.
have actually been reviewed by Public Works and Planning, and we passed both of those with no comments.
Oh, wow.
So we're good to go on that side of things. I'm sure there's gonna be some minor comments from building, there always is.
Yes.
But honestly, the ones I was really worried about the most was Public Works and Planning. Because those are the ones that tell us parking and offsite and all of that kind of stuff. So we're looking really
So
good.
because originally they had said 6 months possibly, right, to this, so they moved up, so that's good, thank you, that's great.
Yeah.
Any other? Any
That's all I
questions?
got for now.
Okay, no public comment, all right. Succession, fire chief succession plan.
All right, this item came off of one of the board's adopted strategic goals, or one of your supporting objectives, I should say, was to review options as they relate. Click that. Okay, works. To review options that relate to filling the role of our fire chief following the anticipated retirement sometime in 2026. And so we've just outlined for you the options that we identified, and I think what options may exist. There may be others as well, for clarity. And I think this sort of dovetails into the next discussion item, more thoroughly. There's obviously the option of hiring another full-time fire chief. Our cost for our rough projections for fiscal year 26-27 is about $238,000 to fill that position. That's full benefit, salary, benefits, all the ancillary costs associated. That would get us hopefully a person that's fully committed to Templeton Fire. And it was, I think it's worth noting that some of the messaging, it's not contained within the approved ordinance that Measure A ultimately adopted, but some of the messaging that the district had initially, and then certainly some of the messaging that existed in the campaign, was that Measure A would allow us to hire a full-time fire chief. So I just wanted to note that. So that was kind of our plan when we pursued Measure A. That's now been more than 6 years ago, was to be able to hire a full-time fire chief. And of course we did, right? We did in 2020, after it passed. We can hire a part-time fire chief. We made this work from 2013 to 2020, essentially. We went through a series of interim and part-time. All of the fire chiefs worked a part-time schedule, whether they were interim or not an interim. We had one part-time fire chief who had that role for about 5 years. The cost would be more variable because it would based on the hours that the person was assigned or available, and their benefit level. And I guess I want to just note that when we had part-time fire chiefs in that window of time, some were not working at all, and for the most of that period of time, they were full-time employees somewhere else doing part-time fire chief duties here on their off days. So there was some limits about their availability or when those individuals could work. And that availability is probably more significant for overhead incident coverage. When we had significant incidents, when we had a part-time fire chief and they were not available to respond, we didn't have a fire chief on scene during those more critical incidents. So that's just something to be kind of noted. There could be kind of a whole significant variation in how this could be filled. But again, I did want to note that this was a tool we used again from 2013 to 2020. Another concept is to seek a partner agency to contract for fire chief coverage. We do have some neighboring agencies, and there's some indication that at least the city of Atascadero might be willing to consider providing this type of coverage for us on a contractual basis. We had made this inquiry back in 2019 and early 2020, and we're considering it, but ultimately it didn't work for the city at the time. But this could be costs are kind of unknown, but we for ballpark purposes have used like $120,000 to $180,000 for something that we've labeled like half to 3/4 time coverage. Details to be worked out if we go down this path. Obviously all those details would have to be sorted out and included in the contractual, in a contract, if again we have a willing partner. This probably would provide some pretty reliable incident coverage. I mean, that's something that I think that would be necessary for us to proceed. In other words, a neighboring agency would have to devote or dedicate that they would respond to a critical incident to provide that coverage for us. And they would have to have somebody scheduled or available at any time to provide it. There might still be some circumstances when there's critical incidents in both communities that would lead to some challenges, but It wouldn't be a circumstance where somebody was sort of off work and then unable to respond. They'd have somebody assigned to cover. It would likely lead to some limited in-office presence or, reduced on-site at Templeton Fire presence. And probably some larger burdens on our fire captains. Just having to coordinate some activities that they're not necessarily accustomed to. A little more challenging in terms of getting guidance because there isn't somebody in the building to look to at all times. But those are things we'd have to kind of work through if in fact we had a receptive partner agency.
So I know you said the specifics we have to work out, but so the way this would work though, well, the fire chief would be working out of Atascadero, say if it's Atascadero, they would be working out of Atascadero. And then, so have, one option I guess I didn't see here, and I guess this could go along with having contract with another agency. How does like having a battalion chief or a division chief, how would that work out? Can we have that or?
Well, I mean, ultimately, you're getting that with contracting a fire chief. So that, the fire chief wouldn't necessarily be the incident response person. They might be a part of that if it's the city of Atascadero. When I left Atascadero, there were 2 battalion chiefs and a fire chief. And we shared what was called the duty coverage, which is 24-hour coverage for a full week. And then the following week, the next person, and the following week, the next person. So it made that person available for responses. That would be part of, I think, what you guys could request from Atascadero is say, look, we do want that as part of our contract. The amount of incidents we have within a year wouldn't overwhelm either city or district. But to the general manager's point, if we had 2 simultaneous major incidents, which don't typically happen too often, then yeah, we'd be looking for potentially mutual aid from city of Paso Robles for a battalion chief or something like that, or the county. So it doesn't reduce costs on a battalion chief or a deputy chief or anything like that. It's just contract services for admin. You get the fire chief, and then the fire chief would delegate, other responsibility, coverage and those types of things.
So if we
Does that answer, I mean, kind of what you're, okay.
So if we're contracting with another agency, let's say, and so how would that work in our administrative, for allocation of administrative? Fees?
So the administrative allocation is based on like fund expenditures. So as long as the expenses come out of the fire fund that cover these contract costs, they'll show up in the same way.
So even though it's contract is a third party, basically, it would be.
I mean, so for example, we don't provide our own dispatch services. We have a contract with county fire to have CAL FIRE do it, right? Those are still expenses for the fire fund and they still are part of the total costs.
And then, so yeah, I just was wondering if we could do, like having, instead of having a fire chief, having a battalion chief, and so that way, instead of having a 1/2 or 3/4 time, make it full time. And the
cost would be the same as our fire chief.
Yeah.
If we needed full-time, if we wanted a full-time city of Atascadero battalion chief, the costs are pretty much the same as our full-time fire chief. Once you go to a full-time, it's gonna be hard to get cost savings, any cost savings.
And then what's the division? Chief?
Division chief, well, the only department in the North County that has a division chief or a deputy chief is Paso Robles. And I mean, keep in mind that the battalion chiefs in Paso Robles make more than I make. So it would be more expensive to contract Paso Robles. The battalion chiefs in Atascadero, I think, make close to, or maybe a little bit more than what I make.
Okay, so the deputy chief, same thing, it's okay, so they're correct, okay, thank you.
Anyway, this was just a concept that our your strategic or your supporting objective in the adopted strategic plan also requested or asked to look at consolidation opportunities, and I don't have a slide for that. But there is, you know, that opportunity may exist at some point in the future. However, right now, it doesn't look like there's an opportunity to see a successful consolidation in 2026. So, you know, there's some, I guess, and consolidation may be too harsh of a word, but some sort of, you know, more formal sharing of resources, or it could lead to something as significant as a consolidation is, you know, always being examined, but nothing is proceeding or looking like it will come to fruition as soon as 2026. So likely be a later opportunity if it is an opportunity. We're located in the middle of the Atascadero and Paso Robles, so we have some advantages to participate in some effort like that, but all the parties need to be willing to pursue that sort of significant change.
Well, there's been discussions.
Yes, and I'm gonna draft basically a menu of what we would request. And provide that to Chief Bryson, Atascadero, and if that matches what they can provide for that cost, then. And it sounds like it's doable.
So when we say consolidation, are we just talking about, I mean, are you talking about,
I'm talking about, I think what you
Well,
said was a
a
contract for
function-
service.
a
oh, you
contract
just
for
meant
service.
contract with chief only?
Function, yes, a functional
Okay.
consolidation. As the general manager was talking about is. Yeah. Those conversations are ongoing, but there's so many things going on right now. And the timing of fire chief retirements would really help with some of that. We thought with what was taking place with some of the retirements, mine being first, would have kind of helped that. But other factors with the city of Atascadero and Paso Robles have both kind of hindered that, because they've hit hiccup points to be able to look at those consolidation efforts. City of Atascadero is constructing 2 new fire stations right now. So, you know, they're not in a position to put something else on their plate. City of Paso Robles has potentially a station 4 coming online pretty soon. So, yeah, there's, you know, the entire North County, the 2 cities, us and the county are just getting significantly busier. It's just what's happening right now.
And then the other option that was listed in your adopted supporting objective was to examine the options for an interim chief. And this is also a tool that can be used on a part-time or even a full-time basis. Interim chiefs are often retired individuals. If they're retired out of like say PERS, they're going to be limited to 960 hours a year. It's meant to be a sort of a stopgap measure, and it's a tool that we could utilize if in fact we had identified a chosen path, but there was going to be a gap in the necessary coverage. In other words, let's say we thought we wanted to recruit a full-time fire chief. That takes a certain amount of time, and we were presented with the retirement of our current chief that was going to occur prior to the ability to get a full-time fire chief on. We could look at bringing in somebody in an interim capacity to cover that gap as an option. And again, I think that exists either on a part-time or full-time basis, or could be utilized to even if we were transitioning into a more of a contract arrangement. But that contract was not done. If there was an indication that it was likely to succeed and we wanted to wait, not bring in another, you know, full-time employee while we were finalizing those arrangements or, you know, establishing the conditions for them to succeed, we could bring somebody on an interim basis, continue to work on implementing a contractual arrangement, cover us in the meantime. So there are some tools available to us, even if for example, the chief's retirement occurs at a date that's before we're ready to implement it. So that's just an overview, and we wanted to be able to answer questions that you might have had about that, or so you are aware of the options that were available.
We don't need to give you any direction. Okay. Any questions?
No.
Public questions?
Keith was here asking.
You guys have any comments about part-time chief, full-time chief?
I think as we get into some of those options, they will affect the existing crew
Yeah, of
in
course.
some in more ways than others that we absolutely owe to engage our
Yeah.
crew, our staff here to ensure that we've answered the questions and anticipated the challenges and put ourselves in a position to succeed.
Captain Goldblum, were you here with part-time chief White, or were you?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So you see that, you saw that, you see that. So that would be a good, good time to have the discussion with you then. All right, okay, thank you very much. I don't think there's any other questions. We can move on to the next item, which is staffing discussion.
This is another item that comes out of your adopted supporting objectives and goals, and just to kind of help kind of frame this discussion. Your current year budget assumes that our current level of staffing, which includes a full-time captain on each shift, a full-time engineer on each shift. There are 3 shifts. 2 of those engineers are funded by SAFER, and a reserve firefighter on each shift, 24 hours a day, will continue until approximately mid-February. That's when the existing SAFER grant expires. Your adopted budget then reverts the staffing level to the same staffing levels that we had pre-SAFER. So let's say in 2022, where we had a full-time captain on each shift. One of the shifts had a full-time engineer. The other 2 shifts relied on a part-time reserve firefighter, driver operators, what we labeled them if they were qualified. And then we had daytime 12-hour reserve firefighters on each daytime portion of the shift. So we had 2 persons at night. For 2 of those shifts, the second person was a reserve firefighter, and 3 persons during the day. On 2 of those shifts, 2 of the persons were reserve firefighters, and on the 3rd shift, one of the persons, the day person, was a reserve firefighter. So that's the way your current adopted budget is structured. The supporting objective asked or stated that we would attempt to compare whether or not it made sense to compare that model, the sort of 2022 operations model, with a fire staffing model that would eliminate the reserve program and instead fund full-time engineers or a second full-time person on each shift, essentially reverting to a 2-person 24/7 coverage, but both persons being full-time employees. In addition, the chiefs come up with some additional alternatives that are listed here that we can kind of walk you through, but I wanted to outline what the adopted goal was so you knew where we started. And then I wanted to kind of point out that for the purposes of just trying to keep this as apples to apples as possible, and that's not necessarily simple, all of these comparisons are a forecast of fiscal year 26-27, so a whole year's worth of costs. And we've included both the current staffing, again, that SAFER level of staffing, the enhanced level of staffing that we've had for the past little over 2.5 years, that Measure A model. Really, it's the way we operated in 2022 with the engineer working on one of the shifts, and then 4 different options, one of which being that the one that was described in the district's goal, which is option 1. So we can, the chief can walk you through how all these work. the numbers are, come from, I did just wanna point out that these, I think the numbers are useful only for the purposes of comparing to one another, not necessarily useful as far as projecting what next fiscal year will look like in an absolute way. So the figures for all of these options, the current year budget, the fiscal year 25, 26 revenue forecast, with the exception of SAFER, and expenditures, with the exception of salary related figures, are just carried forward. They're not a projection. They're not an accurate prediction of what our revenues or expenses will be next fiscal year. They're just carried forward for the purposes of allowing you to compare the costs relative to one another, or the models relative to one another. But, probably more valuable than just the dollar impacts are the operational, impacts and what it means to serve in the community.
So, with the ones that, with the options where you're eliminating the reserves, the reserve program. So that will increase, by doing that, that would increase the overtime and all the other, some of the things, right?
I mean, from the perspective of the second right now, so under the Measure A model, we had 4 full-time employees who were assigned to the engine. And then we had additional reserve folks.
You said
3 captains and 1 engineer. Right, assigned to the engine under the Measure A model.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I thought you meant.
Sorry, not daily,
Yeah.
in total. And so we were dependent on filling the rest of that coverage model with reserve firefighters. And so, yes, from the perspective of when one reserve firefighter was out sick and we had another reserve firefighter take their shift, they were less likely to have an overtime or be on overtime status than if we didn't have any reserve firefighters and all the employees were full-time. Essentially, you'd have to assume that if a current full-time employee is out ill, the person making up their shift or replacing them on the shift would be at an overtime rate.
And is that included in this model?
It's included in the 75,000, yes, which is the allocation for overtime if you look on the budget. So that is part of that.
But wouldn't that 75,000 be more?
No. Because you're just doing like for like again. So we've seen what the 75,000 will do throughout the last 3 years. The unknown comes from the out of county assignments.
Yeah.
And we typically make money on that. So yeah.
So this column here that says this net, again, this is these are probably more useful to compare to one another than they are to the amount that they're over or under cost. So you can see under the Measure A model and the Option 1 model, the net calculations are sort of a wash. So that's probably a more accurate way to compare them as opposed to as opposed to them being approximately $73,000 or $74,000 to the negative, because we just don't yet have accurate, we haven't begun to try to predict revenues or expenses aside from the salary related expenses for the next fiscal year.
And then option 4 is minus, but that because you could do out of county assignments, that minus 12,000 could, be, back to, balance it out 0 or something.
Yeah. Now, keep in mind, option 3 would create issues with out of county assignments. But that's one of those items that I'm trying to negotiate with Chief Bryson, because they have what's called a seasonal program to be able to use some of their seasonal programs to allow our folks to go on out of county assignments. I don't know if that's doable, but it's an option.
But they won't have the experience as our staff would have seasonal, if their seasonal staff would not have the experience.
Their seasonal staff would have the same experience that our reserves would have.
Okay, but not the people that we were sending out to the out of county assignments. Because we'll be sending out captains and engineers.
We send out a mixture of
We send
full-time
out a
and
mix.
reserve.
We send out a captain, an engineer, and a reserve firefighter
So
every
we
time.
will lose that experience. And
No.
because they're gone, they'll be gone, right?
I guess
Because
I
they'll
don't
be
know.
out, because they'll be gone on the out of county assignment, and then instead we're gonna have reserves for a couple of weeks possibly. I'm
Here?
sorry, the seasonal help from Atascadero, right?
No. The seasonal help would go out with the engine.
Oh, their seasonal help.
Their
will-
seasonal help would
Oh,
go on our engine and go out of county.
Oh, okay. So what
Yes.
would they do? Why don't they?
Because they would get the money from that seasonal person back to them.
Oh, okay. So they would get the money,
Correct.
and then we would just get.
Well, we would get the engine cost plus our captain and engineer.
Okay.
So all we would be losing is the cost of the firefighter, which would just go back to them, so it'd be a net neutral.
Okay.
On that regard, we wouldn't lose any experience because it would be covered here.
Right there. Okay.
In the same manner that it is now.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I thought they will be here and
Oh,
ours
no,
would be.
no,
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 okay,
no.
all right. Okay. No, I'm
I
okay.
think it's probably, you know, most important to kind of look at what the coverage is for the community during the shifts on the various models.
I mean, I know you mentioned earlier that with the Measure A model, that, you know, having a part-time chief or half chief, maybe was not advertised in the Measure A type of thing, but I mean, but that, I mean, I guess that could be a little bit of issue. But what I see though, like especially with option two, I mean, yes, we'll be going down to half a chief, but we're getting additional, you know, people, engineers and things like that. So, and then, you know, we have additional, you know, help. So I think is a good it could be a good compromise. I think we're still satisfying the goal of Measure A.
Sure, there's nothing in the adopted ordinance that was approved by Measure A that mandates a full-time chief. I just noted that that was part of the motivation and part of the communication at the time. So just, it's something to keep in mind, but it didn't prohibit you from considering other service alternatives.
It'd just be
Well,
what the
and-
captains, I guess, they.
Yeah, and the other aspect is this allows you to have permanent staffing on the engine of consistent people.
Yeah, that's important.
That's really important. We are out of NFPA compliance. So it compromises on our NFPA numbers. And we would have to figure out something, how to get an additional engine from another neighboring agency and then potentially provide them something on auto aid or mutual aid to meet those NFPA compliant numbers.
Which option? And then is it for option?
So that would, yeah, it'd be option two. All the other options,
Option
except for, and I mean, this is also not taking into consideration whether, you know, the board would consider doing another measure to go ALS, you know, or provide paramedics. You know, obviously that would take time. But you could do this option, retain your personnel and see if another measure, like for paramedics, would fly. And then you could, at that point, look at contracting another full-time fire chief. And bringing the reserve program back. So these are all, in my recommendation, my opinion, they're all stopgap measures to what's gonna need to be addressed in the future.
Even like, I guess.
But it's probably, again, I think it's worth kind of noting, so you know, right now we have 3 persons on, 2 full-time, 1 reservist, 24 hours a day. Under the Measure A model, we had 1 full-time person on 24 hours a day. And 1 reserve firefighter on 24 hours a day. And 1 reserve firefighter on 12 hours a day. Except on one of the shifts, there was a full-time person who replaced the reserve firefighter. That's under the, what's listed as the measure A. Under option one, again, that's the limited reserve model, you have two full-time persons on. So essentially the trade-off is loss of a third person on the shift during the daytime or during the presumed busier hours. And you're replacing that with more consistent staffing with two full-time people, 24 hours a day. And that option two retains that as well. 3 and 4 have a little different twist. A little different mix of full-time staffing. Some of the shifts would be partially covered by reserve firefighters.
And honestly, there are other options out there, scenarios, that would be based on fire seasons. This last fire season, we made our roughly, and don't quote me on the numbers because the checks haven't come in yet, about $130,000 just on the engine. And the board could use that to fund seasonals to continue that instead of using a seasonal firefighter from Atascadero, just hire seasonals here. And use that. Now the risk is you don't have a fire season and we don't make any money. So that's the ultimate risk. It's not a significant funding source that's consistent.
This exercise did produce one thing that's kind of, I think, helps clarify is if you look between the measure A level of funding and what it would cost to sustain what we have now, it's about $206,000 a year more to fund the way we've performed over the last 2.5 years.
Oh, yeah.
So
That's unsustainable.
So our goal tonight was to kind of introduce this to you, get some questions answered, determine if in fact all of these alternatives should remain available, or were there some that you wanted to kind of rule out, or any additional ones that you wanted us to kind of flush out as we move forward, and get comments, from the committee. We are unfortunately only about 3 months away from the existing SAFER grant expiring. And it should be noted that if we are lucky enough to get the 2025 SAFER grant application funded, it doesn't replace the funding level from their existing SAFER grant. So it would have to be again a different model to make that work.
Yeah, my concern with part-time chief is that one, finding a part-time chief, and then two would be just their availability. I mean, I remember when Chief White was here, he couldn't make it. Sometimes, he wasn't available. So that's the concern. So now I know with option two, is option two possible to go to 3/4 chief? And I mean, is it easier to find
So I think, I don't know. I think anything less than a full-time position is gonna limit the applicant pool. We use these terms half-time or 3/4 time, thinking that the more likely alternative would be a contractual arrangement with a neighboring agency. It doesn't mean it could be a part-time individual, but there's a limited number of people who wanna work less than full-time.
So that option two, the plus 44,000, I can almost guarantee you, the city of Atascadero would be looking to use some of that to offset being able to provide us more services. So we could provide them a menu, knowing we're 44,000 in the positive, and then add and delete based on what we want there to give the general manager and the board more availability to a fire chief. Or
Yeah,
that,
I mean, I
or
think-
that, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think going, I view going, if we were to hire a, a part-time chief as a cost savings to help fund additional boots on the ground, it's not inconsequential. My primary concern wouldn't necessarily be the day-to-day administrative duties, but the availability of that person to arrive at those critical incidents, to ensure that we had proper, incident coverage. And not that there's not many every week, but we've been very fortunate over the last 5 years to have somebody who was in town a lot and was able to respond to those critical incidents a lot. Even respond to incidents that didn't end up being critical and go home. And provide additional eyes on the scene and incident command and safety for our crew, et cetera. It's allowed me to sleep better at night. Not to say that we had bad luck before, but just to a certain extent, I'd say we were fortunate that problem didn't lead to a bigger issue. That lack of devoted, expected incident coverage didn't lead to a bigger issue. So I think, there's probably, maybe there's some folks who want to provide some comments here before you close this item. And then, we can ask you for some direction about do you want us to engage the city of Atascadero more formally to determine whether or not there's an appetite? Are you receptive to some of those alternatives?
it's just surprising to see Measure A. It's minus 74.
Yeah, I think again, I don't think you should jump to that. We knew.
Yeah, I knew, but.
We knew we were going in the hole as the years went by because
Yes.
revenues didn't keep up with growing expenses. That 74,000, it's not accurate to say that's our expected shortfall next year.
Yeah.
We haven't updated the budget figures. We can do so by the time, between now and when you meet again, I believe, have at least a better update on that. This was sort of a down and dirty to get you some
Yeah.
comparisons between the various models.
No, I mean, if we have any public comment, I'm sure. Here. Yes.
Speak your mind, guys.
Raise your hand.
Yeah.
Sorry, we didn't call on you earlier.
I don't know, it's tough, I see, I think we all sit in this room understand we're a financial burden, we see it. But the thing this is my personal opinion, I can't take these guys from being on the engine, consistency is my goal. To have a consistent fire captain, a consistent engineer is a start. We started one model, then went to another model, and it seems like we're going up. I mean, we're taking a step back, but we're still keeping the consistency going. However we get there, needs to stay consistent. My personal opinion, contracting with an outside agency, we kind of do it already on major incidents. We get an automatic battalion chief from CAL FIRE on a major structure fire or a major incident. So it's kind of no difference. Yeah, I understand I can't walk around the corner and go to the office and go, hey, chief, I got this problem. So I got to pick up the phone, or we got to pick up a couple more items. But chief said it best earlier, we're just getting busier. And we can't have the hodgepodge of reserves that come and go here for 6 months and they come on the engine and it's like, I'd rather be on myself at that point in time. No disrespect to the reserves, but they're not here long enough to gain that experience and that training and education. We have a full-time captain, a full-time engineer on the engine and working side by side. We got a little more experience between us and, provide a decent coverage for a basic call. And then a little bit of an enhanced call till we get more resources there. But that's just my 2 cents in the matter.
I get it, and this probably takes your time, when you have to deal with reserves and training and everything like that. Is, taking your focus from what you need to be doing as well. So no, I get that with any job. You have people coming in, it makes it more challenging.
I agree. I think Captain Goldblum kind of nailed it on that. I would have no problem reaching out for the mentorship or, you know, to a Atascadero for the chief. I think the priority would be maintaining the consistency on the engine at this point. And with career firefighters, I understand financial burden, but I would rather have a career engineer next to me that is trained, has some years on the job, than a driver operator and a reserve firefighter that have 6 months on the job that I can't. At that point, it's more on me to babysit both those positions. And I can't fully trust what either one of them, you know, I wanna make sure they're not gonna get off on the freeway in front of a car or do something not wise on a structure fire. It feels more bearing on myself than having a partner that's a career firefighter that I can trust. So,
So you guys, so like you guys are kind of leaning towards having a part-time chief, right? Here, and then you're willing to take on a little bit more responsibility because of, you know, not having the full-time chief here. But you'd rather have a more permanent, like a fire engineer type, so that's what you like to see.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter for you if it's half-time chief or 3/4, or is that? You know, we're talking, I guess, 20 hours versus 30 hours. Is
You
that
know,
what-
all of those details would have to be sort of sorted out. They're just listed there as kind of examples or relative. We don't know what the Atascadero could devote or dedicate.
Plus, they all told me they're gonna be calling me after I retire all the time anyways, so.
So,
So I do wanna point out,
We're up to 960 hours, right? Is that what it was?
I do wanna point out that the first option there is essentially, I mean, again, this is real rough initially, but shows that, you know, you could, if in fact the priority became career staffing as opposed to, you know, quality of the staff members as opposed to the numbers on the engine, you could eliminate the reserve program and maintain career staffing and not change the fire chief structure, and it's close to a wash. Again, that's the initial set of calculations. I will note though, under option one, we couldn't, it would require some other further partnership to be able to participate in out of county assignments and such. We wouldn't have enough people here to send away and still cover the station.
And keep in mind, like general manager said, I mean, a full-time chief, 3 captains, 3 engineers, that would be optimal. Because then you got a chief that is here, dedicated here, but that still doesn't mean that you're gonna have somebody that lives in town and is able to respond to everything. We're not trying to toot my own horn, but I've been dedicated to do in the past 5 years. So finding somebody that lives in Templeton, you're available within a couple of minutes. You know, that's why I really weighed that option. And the likelihood of finding somebody that would be willing to provide that same level. I don't know, maybe they're out there. But the likelihood's probably not good, especially at what we're paying for a fire chief. Now, keep in mind, I am the lowest paid fire chief in the county, so that's the other aspect of, you know, why I looked at a contract type situation, getting high caliber people, for a lesser.
I think it would behoove us to make at least the inquiry seriously for halftime and 3/4 time for neighboring agencies. See if there is an actual movement or idea that we can share those resources. I don't think anyone outside of the Atascadero and Paso, any distance further would.
I don't think Paso is as interested right now.
Okay.
But Atascadero is, and I've had many conversations with Chief Bryson. It's just, before we got into details, we kind of wanted to know what the appetite was.
And then at the same time, trying to identify the appetite for a full-time as well. Fill that position. Cause even if from our perspective of that we want to have a full-time, do we have enough applicants for a full-time fire chief as well, noting the pay?
It's one of those things you don't know until you do the process. I mean, every time, the applicant pool will be different each time you recruit. You know, we got a pool of applicants, qualified applicants in 2020. You know, we had a finalists for that position, that were qualified, for that role, and made a hire out of that pool. We haven't done so since. And it's, I'm sure we would be able to get applicants. It's whether or not we can find a good fit or someone who meets the district's need. And then I guess I want to keep in mind a residency. For example, I reside in Templeton, but my lifestyle is not that like Chief Peterson's. I'm my family live states away, and so I'm not here as often as, say, Chief Peterson's here. Because my kids they chose to move far, far away. And his came back. He's much nicer.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with you. Don't worry about it. I won't blame you.
No, I appreciate the input for full-time individuals. I think that's something that makes a very big measurably difference within the firefighting force. Knowing you can trust the individuals that you trained with, you've gone out and seen what an instance is.
I'll say something, Eric, real quick, in regards with the full-time, like Captain Goldblum, Captain Baker were talking about. I completely agree with everything they're saying when it comes to at least at a minimum, the 2 full-time people in the front. I can speak from my own personal experience, starting here as a reserve, and I think from when I started there to when I started full-time to now, the leaps and bounds of knowledge and skills jumped dramatically. I think from my personal experience, and it shows when you have that consistency with people, and you know, and the consistency of knowing what each one of us is going to be able to do on an incident is leaps and bounds more than somebody you never work with. I think that should be, in my opinion, a big priority for us as full-time staffing.
Thank you.
Yeah, I get that. That's totally understandable. So, and then, on some of these models, the NFPA it says that the NFPA compromise, I mean, how worried should we be about that? I mean, in terms of our decision making, I mean, is that something that we could try to help mitigate that, or is that gonna be a problem if we go?
So there's a couple ways to look at it. And this is one of those balances between a full-time chief and a neighboring agency being contract. A neighboring agency being contract, they're going to compete for safer, all of that kind of stuff. Will they incorporate us into that safer and into that strategic planning of, hey, how do we enhance the department? Or a full-time chief would definitely be more focused on just Templeton. You know, in NFPA requirements, it calls for 4-person staffing because you have to have 2 outside to go 2 inside. That's industry standard unless we have what's called an immediate life threat. And then if something were to happen, you better justify it or people are gonna own that department. The lawsuits will fly. But with that said, we have Engine 30, Atascadero, and Paso, which augment our 2 in, 2 out. It's just the delay that we're looking at. And in any fire, delay is deadly. If we would have had to wait on the feed and grain,
Oh, yeah.
we would have lost other structures. No doubt in my mind. But it's this type of situation where we went inside, made an attack. We wouldn't have been able to do that if we would just been limited staff that day, until other resources got here. The standard rescue scenario is, again, 2 people in, 2 people out. If we went just 2 people, we would have some delays if we didn't have a life threat situation, which could cause more structural loss, more content loss of fires. So that's something to consider. The less staffing, the more loss, more likelihood of property and life loss. So that's something to consider. To augment that, there's a couple of things we could do. We could ask the county and say, can you give us 1 more engine on a structure fire response auto aid? They don't have to do that. Will they do that? Well, it'd be coming from station 52 is the next closest station. And that's a 15-20 minute drive from out there. So I don't know what the benefit is, except for when ISO does our next rating, that it's on the books, that, yeah, we have that additional engine
Oh, I
coming.
see, I see.
So, you know, but they will look at response times of those locations. We were fortunate to hit our ISO rating just a few months ago, and now we're set at a 3 for another 5 years. But in 5 years, they may reevaluate and say, well, you guys aren't meeting NFPA standards, you're not meeting 2 in 2 out standards, and bump our ISO rating up, and therefore insurance rates in the community go up. So all of that factors in. I hope that kind of answered your question,
Yeah,
but
just, yeah. It's just, yeah, it's like, you know, you wanna have ideal situation, which would be our current staffing, but yes.
well, honestly, the ideal situation, if, I mean, and again, I keep saying this, but I'm serious about it, is if you wanted to enhance service to the community and say, hey, we can provide paramedics for $10 a month.
Yeah.
And it would increase our services and be able to keep what we're doing right now. Full-time chief, full-time engineer, captains, full-time engineers, and reserve firefighters.
But that's gonna take time.
It will, yeah.
So we have to deal with this for coming up in the next couple of months. Yeah, I mean, I'm open with you discussing this with, you know, it sounds like a Atascadero would be, you know, for like a contract situation and see where we go, where, you know, where we could find out, and then ultimately the board has to decide which direction they wanna go.
Yeah, just note of the models that are options shown here, options 3 and 4 don't maintain, you know, have some reliance on reserve firefighters to cover, some of the, actually the second slot on one of the shifts.
Yeah.
And of course, our Measure A model had 2 of the shifts covered by the second individual being a reserve firefighter. And then all the additional daytime coverage was a reserve firefighter. So about half of the models that are shown there are reliant on reserve firefighters to provide at least a second individual on the.
Which kind of defeats the purpose of having staff that's.
Yeah, I think it's in conflict with what was requested in terms of, you know.
Yeah.
Also keep in mind that the 12-hour firefighters, which are on 2 of the models, would not have helped us at all on any of the recent structure fires we've had, because they were before 8 a.m. and after 8 a.m. or 8 p.m.
Okay. So many details.
Yes.
I mean, and most of these numbers are also they're all based upon us not receiving a safer, so within any of the recommendations or any of the verbiage that we provide for individuals, these models are intrinsically involved with the idea that we will not see safer.
Correct.
Yeah, yeah. If we receive the SAFER grant,
Our
other
bond-
alternatives become available.
Yeah, and hopefully we should know in the next couple of weeks, I would think, I mean, because if it keeps, as you say, dragging on like this, is probably not a good sign. Okay. Is that it for staffing? Oh,
Yeah, we're just
Dave,
seeking just some, I guess, guidance,
yeah, I mean,
I mean,
not
it's-
talk to
I-
us, you know.
yeah, we will more formally engage with the city of Atascadero. Is there any alternatives additional alternatives that you want us to, kind of keep afloat, or are you prepared to remove any? Are you,
Well, the current staffing can't do.
Well, no, but I think from the feedback, the idea of the reserves, like we should kind of lower onto it, look at actual full-time
Yeah.
staffing.
So that'd be option 1 and 2.
Yes, I think that would probably be ideal. I mean, fiscally, I would say option 4 is there. And that's just from a fiscal level where we're not. We could probably manage budgetary wise. It's not ideal at all, but yes, I would definitely suggest things modeling around options 1 and 2.
Yeah. I mean, out of county assignments would be nice, but. You know. I'm mostly concerned with what happens here in Templeton, so probably with option 2, as you said, that we won't have that out of county assignment option, right? It'll kind of go away.
it would require a higher level of cooperation with partner
Yeah,
agencies,
so-
so we could bring more people on.
But that to me, shouldn't be priority, I guess.
It brings in
But,
financial.
if we do choose option 2, it would, it's already has some inherent savings in there too, right? So we may not, we won't require the out of county assignment.
Well, I mean,
There's a significant amount of
yeah,
loss without. out of
that's a
county.
significant loss, cause averaging over the last several years, that's about 100,000 a year.
Yeah.
And, not to throw fuel on the fire, but we've got equipment needs that are gonna have to be addressed. Particularly our SCBA's.
So you wanna look for an option that you could still continue to do the out of county assignments then?
Well, I mean, I'm gonna be gone, it doesn't matter what.
Yeah, I know, but that's what
I mean,
you
ideally,
recommend.
That's
want
my
more staffing.
recommendation, yes.
So
Yeah.
then option 2 probably won't work out then.
Well, it depends. So option 2 could be one of those situations where, if we contracted with the Tascadero and said, hey, we have an additional 20,000 that we can throw at giving us some part-time seasonal firefighters to use to go out of county.
So that would be okay.
Yeah,
We have to do a little negotiations, okay, alright. Okay, that's just. But yeah, I think if we could try to avoid reserve program, I think that would be nice. Just to see
Yeah,
what
the reserve
option-
program is what's allowing us to participate in the out of county, responses today. I guess my only caution, it's not to suggest that you should, choose something other than it. It will be very hard to bring it back if it goes away. We're one of the very few departments that are running one today.
We
Most
are.
have given them up,
we are the only department running a reserve program right now.
so.
Must be a reason they're giving it up, right?
Well, yeah, it's not without its challenges, right? So,
I mean, that's kind of where I looked at it at the fiscal level. We could probably tweak numbers with option 4 and 13. Still try to figure out things. It's difficult.
But again, that puts one
Yes.
driver operator
Yeah,
who's an unseasoned person
yeah.
on
And that-
with one of our
None of
captains.
these are ideal.
I think, yeah, maybe option 2 and working with the Tascadero to get seasonal help. So,
Yeah. Whatever we can do to support. the
Well,
fire
and,
department.
you could potentially look at option 1. and still contract with the Atascadero to say, hey, if you add some additional seasonals as they call them, alternates. Alternate seasonals, they don't work shifts, they're just backups. If you add a couple of additional alternate seasonals, we'll take them on our out of county assignments and give you guys the money back.
And I think a lot of this is based upon us getting into some type of, at least initially, informal agreement with the Atascadero.
Correct.
And we get that information back from the Atascadero that they want to share resources. I think our direction would be a lot more alleviated from how we, because I mean, right now I'm just looking at the numbers, fiscal numbers. And they're hard to chew. I think if we start seeing things from Atascadero, or neighboring other partner agencies, that we can get something from there, we have better direction.
Okay, you guys have enough direction?
Yeah, I hope so. I just.
Confused?
I'm not confused, but time is not on our side. Our current saver grant expires in the middle of February, probably. Ideally you'd have this, at least, ideally you'd know by January what you want to do in the middle of February.
Yeah.
So we could be prepared to implement it. So we're not making too many changes in the.
I mean, every one of these options are options that we would consider, but at the same time, we have to understand that there's only so much budget.
Okay. All right, future items, so I guess you have the master plan.
So, yeah, and just for clarification, we were prepared at your meeting to kind of go through the 2020 one master plan assessment and verbally update you with where you were. There was a interest in getting a kind of a written response back. We really haven't had a chance to provide that. If that's something the committee still wants, we'll need to prioritize that and get something to you, or to a future committee meeting.
Yeah.
There are like 36 or 39 specific items that would need to be addressed. If you want to do all of them, or we can go through them verbally and see if you want, which ones you'd like to see a written response on. Just trying to figure out how you want us to spend our time.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of items.
Well, there's 18 primary items, and then there are short-term and long-term that add up to the 30 something.
If we received it and had a sent back that we can actually review, rather than have to go through every single item.
I'm more concerned about what it takes to get that to you. If we're gonna prepare, 40 or so updates, that's a little, it's not a ton, it's not 2 weeks worth of work, but it's some effort, and I wanna make sure it's gonna be of value. So, I mean, you adopted a goal that says you're gonna review the master plan assessment. So, we could do that at a committee meeting verbally, and if there are 2 or 3 or 4 of those items that you say deserve a published update, prepare that. Or we can prepare a published update for all the items and bring it to you.
So okay. So we could, I think last time also we kind of ran out of time too, right?
Kind of like now too.
Yes, yeah, so if we could maybe have it where we could focus on it, but unfortunately, I know the fireworks always takes a lot of time. If we could somehow focus on that item, and I would say, I'm willing to just go through it real quick and then see if there's 3 or 4 items that we wanna discuss further, then we could do that, rather than have you guys, write up something about 40 different items.
Okay.
How about you?
I'm good with that too.
Okay, and then the information that's contained in these sheets that follow this page, we were thinking we could spend some time to begin to fine tune the budget level work. That's not wasted effort. That will lead into next year's budget development anyway. We're just doing so earlier, that might give you a higher level of confidence about what these net figures are.
I think that would help. Cause it's a little hard to crunch 70,000.
I don't know. It's like, what?
Just keep in mind, we had anticipated at the onset that this, when Measure A was implemented, it created some savings in its initial years. And then it was anticipated to, become kind of net zero, and then the latter years would actually have a deficit. And so I'm not surprised. I don't know if it'll end up being that much in the hole, but I don't, if we were to go back to our Measure A operations in 26, 27, my expectation would be we would at least start the budget year in the hole, and we'd be using some of the savings we produced in the initial years to pay for it.
Last fiscal year, this one, we're 50,000 for the budget.
So, yeah,
We use 50,000 for savings.
I just wanna look at sustainability of that too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and then just obviously we're gonna have to discuss the fireworks a little bit more. Are we going to discuss, or are you just?
I don't know, we'll have to see what we can get out of David Hirsch. If we got sufficient, direction, we'll, based on the discussion, we'll take it to the board. I do think that perhaps maybe some of the enforcement, not necessarily the draft ordinance or anything, but the tools that we use in enforcement can come back. There'll be time to bring that back to the committee before next 4th of July. So you can say, no, we think we're better off spending our money on education versus hiring airplane to fly overhead and gather evidence. I mean, there'll still be some time to figure those things out.
Yeah, it could be, well, we have to, work more closely with the sheriff department and have them do the enforcement, and we.
Well,
do
and
the-
Yeah, and I didn't want to get too far into that, but I mean, some of that, the 17.5 that he was talking about, I think it's a number that's way more than the current. Is it enough? No, but do I think we would create ourselves deficits if we just gauged it properly? No. And I think it would just be smart deployment of our resources. Honestly, what I do fear is that we do away with everything and we have the same level of enforcement because people are still doing illegal stuff.
I think this committee, and from everyone's perspective, is we have to do something.
Right.
And whether that is laddered steps towards a goal, or, the 17.5 is not gonna cover it. We understand that. We're not covering it already. So any steps that we're doing for enforcement is better than no steps.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So, I guess our goal is we deal with some of these items, was the makeup of this committee could change by mid-January when the board considers the committee member makeup. Does this committee want to try to meet between now and that date to continue working on those items? Either these we can give you an update on the budget forecast and what progress we may be able to make with the Atascadero and maybe able to eliminate some of the options or further develop them.
That's only 6 weeks away.
That's 2 months. Yeah, over the next 2 months, if you really are gonna be in a position to have to make some decisions come January.
So, I would say send out the portion for the calendar to see whether or not we can actually get to consensus.
Yeah, we won't need to include, if we don't include the fireworks, it'll be fewer people to try to schedule, and so
Yeah.
greater likelihood of achieving a date that works.
Okay.
Alright.
But I do realize we're heading into December and it's a busier time and people have obligations and you probably don't want to be here on Christmas Eve at 8:30 at night.
He did indicate to me that he stated he could not make it tonight on the doodle poll.
Yeah, I think Carrie thought it was maybe a tentative list or we had a real difficult time getting this meeting scheduled.
Yep.
I'm trying.
No, I'll do my best with whatever scheduling is, except for Thanksgiving, but other than that, free until the new year. So.
Okay. Alright. That's it, meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
8:30, 3-hour meeting. We made up for last night.
You know where Chief Todd's going to?